From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as...
Johnny Dollar.
This is Mrs. Wish, Mr. Dollar.
Oh, yes?
Do I understand that you're in San Francisco because of the disappearance of my husband?
That's right, Mrs. Wish. The doctor's insurance company seem to feel that the circumstances deserve some looking into.
It is very strange, and I'm quite frightened.
I know you must be upset, and I know that the police have bothered you quite a bit. But I wonder if I could come out and talk to you.
Of course, Mr. Dollar. Only one thing is important. That is to learn that my husband is alive and safe. Please feel free to come any time that's convenient to you.
Edmund O'Brien in a transcribed adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Home Office, Washingtonian Life Insurance Company, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Malcolm Wish, M.D. matter. Expense account item 1, $218.45 airfare and incidentals between Hartford and San Francisco. There, after a phone call to his wife, I went to the home of the missing Dr. Wish, which was situated about halfway up fashionable Nob Hill.
Good morning.
Oh, Mrs. Wish is expecting me. My name is Dollar.
Yes, she is. Come in.
Thank you.
You're the insurance investigator.
That's right.
I'm the daughter. My name's Cecil. You learn anything about Father?
Not yet, but I just got here this morning.
Sure, should have realized that. I'd like to talk to you about it.
Do you mean you think you know some other things that other people don't?
Some other people.
You haven't told the police?
No, I didn't like the man who came here, Lieutenant Hughes. I don't want to talk to you until after you've seen her.
Sure, anything you say.
Where are you staying?
The Cleveland Hotel on Sutter.
I'm going to be downtown. I'll meet you at the coffee shop at noon.
Okay, Cecil, I'll be there. Now, where can I find your mother?
The second door leads to the morning room and a view of the bay. She's waiting, so just walk right in. And don't mention what I said to you.
All right. I'll see you later.
Yeah.
Mrs. Wish?
Yes?
I was told to come right in. I'm Johnny Dollar.
Oh, yes, I've been waiting. Come and sit down.
I'll take up as little of your time as possible, Mrs. Wish.
Oh, it's quite all right.
I understand the last time you saw your husband was night before last when he left the house to make a professional call.
That's correct.
Would you tell me about it, please?
Oh, I only wish I knew more about it. My husband very seldom accepts night calls. But night before last, the phone rang, and he talked for a moment, and then he left.
What time was that?
A little past 9.
Isn't it his habit to let you know where he's going when he goes out at night?
No, I'm afraid it isn't anymore. Once it was, yes.
And you didn't hear him mention the name of the patient that called him?
No. I was out of the room, and he answered the phone himself.
Well, he must have said something to you.
Well, he seemed to be in a hurry. And he told me he'd be back in an hour or so, that it was an emergency. Naturally, we assumed that it was one of his regular patients. So yesterday, my daughter and I started phoning them. We got the names from Dr. Huber.
He's the other doctor in your husband's office?
Yes. I believe he's called some of Malcolm's patients, too, but none of them seem to have phoned that night. Oh, I'm terribly worried, Mr. Dollar.
We'll do everything we can. How do I get to his office from here, Mrs. Wish?
It's in the Tide building on post. You can take the cable car on the corner, and it'll drop you just a half a block away.
Thanks. I'll be in touch with you.
Come right in, Mr. Dollar. I'm sorry I was so brief with you on the phone. I had a patient in the office at the time.
That's perfectly all right, Dr. Huber.
It wouldn't help matters to discuss Malcolm's disappearance in front of him. You know how tongues wag. Please be seated. It is true that this situation is not yet common knowledge?
The papers have left it alone. How did you hide the truth when you phoned his patients?
What? Oh, of course, you have met with his wife. She was insistent that I do that. But it is not my duty, I thought, at least at this time. Do you not agree?
I suppose so, if you don't think Dr. Wish is in danger.
I don't jump to that conclusion until I see some reason.
The man has disappeared, Doctor.
Many men have disappeared. Dr. Wish is 52 years old. He has practiced here in San Francisco for more than 20 years. Before that in Seattle. The past 2 months, I have noticed a change in him. Tiring. He was no longer satisfied with his life.
Are you inferring that he might have ducked out on his own?
Perhaps even amnesia.
Does it sound like amnesia for a man to answer the phone, tell his wife he'll be home in a short time, pick up his medical kit, and drive away in his car?
Who knows about amnesia?
Does an amnesia victim go to the trouble of keeping a car hidden from the police of 3 states?
It would depend on the type of amnesia.
I didn't think there were types, so you must mean voluntary or involuntary. If he did just suddenly drop his life here, and you know that to be the case, I hope
know
you...
nothing. Dr. Wish and I discussed very little but medical matters. I repeat that I realize that for 2 months or longer he was not a happy man. If he has made arrangements to change that, I do not know, but it is a possibility.
You wouldn't tell me if he were in trouble over his practice, would you?
I would not, but I'm sure that he wasn't. Dr. Wish is, to the best of my knowledge, a highly ethical man of medicine.
You're probably being cooperative, Doctor, but I'm not sure whether it's with Wish or with the police and me.
I am simply without information.
Yeah. I have an appointment in 15 minutes, but I'd like to come back this afternoon and get a list of his patients.
You are welcome. Please mention it to the receptionist on the way out. She'll be happy to gather the information for you.
Good afternoon, sir. Would you prefer a table or the counter?
I was supposed to meet someone here at noon.
5 after, sir.
Yeah, I know. Well, I don't see her. I guess she's later than I am.
Would it have been a Miss Cecil Wish, sir?
Oh, yes, that's right.
Then if you're Mr. Dollar, she phoned and asked me to tell you that she wasn't able to lunch with you, but that she would be reached by phone at her home any time after 2.
I see. Well, thanks very much. I'll take the counter. Might as well have a sandwich. I didn't suspect Cecil's motives until I left the coffee shop. Then I realized I was being followed. I kept my eyes pretty much off the man, but saw enough to describe him. Medium height and a broad-shouldered suit, and the hair that showed below a hat was so white blonde that I thought it must have been bleached. He followed me to a drugstore where I phoned Lieutenant Hughes, the detective on the case. Then my shadow followed me aboard a Market Street bus and dropped off a block after I did. He was lounging on a corner when I went into police headquarters.
I'm glad to have you in town, Dollar, but I don't have anything to give you. I put out a description of the doctor in his car, and I've been riding along on that. I'll have to for a few more days unless something breaks.
I take it you've talked to the other doctor in his office?
Yeah, I talked to him.
And he hinted that Dr. Wish dropped out of sight.
Yeah, and that in itself doesn't happen to be a crime. No, not yet, anyway.
Things like that sometimes crowd the law against insurance fraud, Lieutenant.
Well, not for a while. Oh, don't think I'm passing this off without reason. With the information I have now, there's darn little I can do, except wait and see if the wife doesn't get a brush off by mail from Alaska, someplace that's legal.
Do you have a line on any women in his life?
It doesn't necessarily have to be one, does it?
It helps sometimes. Do you know any reason why somebody should be tailing me?
Tailing you? When'd you spot it?
Right after I had lunch at the Cleveland Hotel coffee shop?
When do you think the tail was put on you?
I'm not sure. I went out to the Wish house this morning. From there, I went to his office. From there to the coffee shop. And I came here.
Any ideas?
Yeah. I've got an idea that a man who wants to drop out of sight wouldn't risk drawing attention to himself by putting a tail on somebody who's looking for him. Would you?
Hardly.
It's all right with you. I'd like to leave things the way they are. I wanted to let you know about it, but I think we ought to let them play for a while.
I'll go along with that. I got some good men I could put on it, but there's always a chance of tipping him.
Let's leave him alone. Maybe he's only a hungry tourist who thinks I might lead him to a good steak. He followed me back to the doctor's office, and he was waiting for me 15 minutes later when I left with the names, addresses, and phone numbers of what I'd been told were all the patients of Dr. Wish. By this time, I was learning a few things about the man following me. He was good at it. Unobtrusive, not too eager, yet never losing me, though I didn't make myself too easy to follow. I let my shadow watch me buy some stationery and a paper near my hotel. Then I went up to my room, hoping he'd relax downstairs. I checked in the corridor 3 times in the next half hour, and then at 2:15 I phoned the Wish house. Miss Wish?
Yes, who's this?
Mr. Dollar.
Oh, I'm sorry about not meeting you. Something came up that I couldn't get out of.
You may have more trouble getting out than even you figured on.
What'd you say?
It doesn't look good when you promise information and then don't show up to give it. Why did you really make that date and then not show up?
I couldn't help it. There wasn't anything I could do about it.
What is this information you have? You can give it to me now, can't you?
Not over the phone.
I'll come up there.
No, because Mother will be here. I'll have to meet you someplace. Are you at your hotel?
I can be any time you say.
Where then, the bar?
I think it'd better be my room.
Well, that... All right. I'll be there at 8:30. Which one is it?
8:30. Why so late?
Because Mother will be here and I'll have to sneak out. You sound as if you've learned something, have you?
We'll talk about it when you get here. The room is 323. Don't stop at the desk. Come right up to the third floor and wait near the elevators. I'll be a minute or so late.
Why do I have to
Never
wait?
mind. Be here. If you stand me up again, I'll see that the police make the next date with you.
Why are you threatening me? I'll be there.
So will I, Cecil. Goodbye. I left as soon as I'd hung up and led my shadow away from the hotel. Before, I thought there could have been any contact between him and Cecil Wish. I kept him moving the rest of the afternoon and away from phones as much as possible while I called on some of the missing doctor's patients. I arranged it so that he couldn't have seen her go into the hotel. And still, when I reached the third floor, she wasn't waiting for me. When I spotted Lieutenant Hughes leaning against my door, I thought I knew why.
Where the devil have you been, Dolly? Thought we'd lost
I've
you.
been trying to do my job. Did you scare a girl away from here? Or did you notice?
There's a time and place. Tell me, has this man stopped tailing you?
No, he's waiting across the street from the entrance. Why, Lieutenant?
Dr. Wish's coat, hat, shoes, and a suicide note were found on the Golden Gate Bridge about an hour ago.
Uh-oh. Have they found his body?
Not yet. And now explain for what possible reason this guy should have been tailing you.
We will return you to the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar, in just a moment. George Raft, popular screen star, plays Rocky Jordan, an American in Cairo. His mission, adventure. Every week starting next Wednesday over most of these same CBS stations, George Raft as Rocky Jordan gets enmeshed in new, often bizarre exploits. Next Wednesday, Rocky Jordan takes part in a search to find a beach strewn with diamonds. Don't miss this exciting CBS thriller. And now with our star, Edmund O'Brien, we return you to the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
As it turned out, the lieutenant and I, instead of playing it smart, should have collared the blonde shadow hours before, but the boat had sailed. By the time we got down to the street, he disappeared. An alarm was broadcast on his description, and Lieutenant Hughes and I went up to the Wish address.
This doesn't seem possible. I've steeled myself to accept almost any kind of horrible news, an accident, some sudden illness, anything, but not this.
Didn't your husband in any way show that he might have been despondent?
In no way.
Was there any trouble between you and him?
We were normally happy little spats. Cecil,
Yes, Mother?
was there anything hidden from me? Was your father unhappy because of something that you knew about and I didn't?
Not that I know of, Mother.
You've seen the note, Mrs. Wish?
Yes, I've seen the note.
And you're still sure he wrote it?
Oh, I wish I weren't so sure.
I'm sorry that it has to be brought up, but it sounded as if he were pretty unhappy about his life.
Whatever it was, he kept it hidden. I hadn't an inkling. We've been so happy.
The other doctor in his office thought that he might not have been so happy.
Then Dr. Huber was aware of something I knew nothing about. Perhaps I was blind. Oh, I just don't...
I'm awfully sorry. Now we're going to have to talk about it.
Oh, yes.
She's doing quite well, don't you think?
Not as well as you are.
I'm not trying.
What are you doing?
Being honest. Father's not dead, and I think she knows it.
I'm glad you're so sure.
Not a suicide from the Golden Gate Bridge. That's too much.
Come on out in the other room.
I'm going to get myself...
We'll be back in a minute, Lieutenant.
Yeah, all right.
Cecil, where are you going?
I'll come right back, Mother. Father had no reason to take his life.
What do you think has happened, then?
I was going to tell you what I thought when we planned to meet at noon, but I changed my mind.
Is it a change of mind what came up that you couldn't get out of?
It's harder to get away from than a lot of things. First, I thought that he was playing a dirty trick on me. Then I wondered if I wouldn't be playing a dirtier one on him by telling you about it.
You changed your mind about meeting me at 7, too.
I got the news about the things on the bridge just as I was leaving. Father's reached what they call the dangerous age. I guess it is. He finally fell in love.
I don't envy him. Dr. Huber diagnosed it as possible amnesia.
A typical Huber diagnosis. I don't think he knows about things.
But you found out.
Of course I did. I wasn't taken in by these night calls at all. I followed him. I even talked to her without her knowing who I was. She was nice. And I felt like a chaperone.
What's her name?
Ann Mobius.
Did she talk you into luring me to that coffee shop?
What do you mean?
I was onto that guy that was following me from the time I left there.
I don't know what you mean.
Stop it. I led him right over to police headquarters and told Lieutenant Hughes about him.
Mr. Dollar, I don't know what you're talking
The
about.
guy was good. I had half a hunch he might be a private detective. But then when I realized how well practiced he was on melting away from the police, I began to wonder. There's a police alarm out on him now, so you'll save a lot of time and trouble by telling me who he is and where we can find him.
You think I made you go there so you could be followed?
I was followed.
Why?
You put me in that coffee
But
shop.
why were you followed?
Because I was looking for your father. You know that.
I don't know it.
Yes.
I don't know anything about her. She's younger than Father, about 34 or 5.
Married or single?
I don't know.
Where does she live?
Wesley. It's an apartment, a building on Van Ness. I thought they'd run away together.
Maybe. Give me the apartment number. Lieutenant and I'll go and see.
It'll be the next one. Let's take it slow.
No voices.
Wait a minute. No, I guess not. There's a light showing under the door, though.
Try it.
Yeah. It's locked. Here, I'll get it.
That closed door must lead to a bedroom.
Mm-hmm. Let's try it.
Hold it. There on the floor. Man's suit coat.
Suit coat. Let's see that.
Look at the side here.
It's dried blood. A lot of it.
Sure. Look here. Bullet hole? Or a knife? Huh. The label says Brewers, Carson City, Nevada.
Yeah. Let's look in there. Got the light switch?
Yeah.
There's the shirt that was under the coat. Oh, look there, more bloodstains on the bed.
There's something more, Lieutenant. It figures that Dr. Wish was here, all right. There was a metal wastebasket in the bathroom doorway. In it was a large amount of surgical dressing, all bloodstained. It told of a wound that had been dressed and redressed a number of times. Other things in the room fell into place. A sales slip from Mill's department store in San Francisco. It was in receipt of the purchase of a man's shirt and jacket, probably to replace the bloodstained ones left in the apartment. The slip was dated PM, the current day, which was Thursday. And finally, on the dresser, we found a day-old Nevada newspaper. The front page item that seemed to fit reported, unidentified trio murders and robs Carson City betmaker. Dying man believed to have wounded one of his assailants.
Well, the time figure's all right. Leaving then, they could have gotten to San Francisco by 8 or so, the night the doctor disappeared. There are a couple of stands in town that carry out-of-state papers. They're a day old, so this one must have been bought today.
And we didn't miss him by far, Lieutenant. According to the signs, this guy must be in pretty bad shape. To get him out of this building without drawing attention, they'd have to do it after dark, don't you think?
Yeah, I think they were plenty rushed. They'd done something to cover up the tracks here if they'd had time.
Dr. Wish's coat and stuff on the Golden Gate Bridge. Where does that lead?
Almost any place. It's wide open once you're across the bridge.
But the blonde man who was still following me when I met you at the hotel, after sticking together this far, would they leave him or come back after him?
That's a thought. I'm going to get on the phone out here and put some men on it.
I'll check the tenants on this floor and see if the building manager's come in yet. I'll meet you at your office. I got nothing from the building. The woman, Ann Mobius, hadn't lived there long enough to become friendly with anyone. The manager knew that she had received men visitors now and then, but that was all. Nobody had seen an injured man enter or leave. An hour later, in Lieutenant Hughes's office, I learned that the police had had better luck than I had.
I got on a teletype to Carson City. Your description of the blonde man fits what they have in a man named Ned Ring. Records in Nevada and Utah.
Anybody with hair like that never should have tried to be a criminal.
Yeah. And I gave them the name Movius. They have an Alan Movius, no record. But I know an associate of this Ned Ring, so it figures.
No next of kin on Movius, I suppose, huh?
No, but he must be a brother to the woman, unless that's her married name. Anyway, they never heard of her. She's clean as far as we're concerned.
Yeah. Well, I guess she just happened to know
No, wait a minute. Hello. Right. Yeah, that's the name, all right. Oh, good. Put him in a room. We'll be right down.
How was that?
Your blonde friend. He was picked up boarding an airport limousine. Well, Ring, I'm glad to see you.
Look, I don't know what any of this is all about. You got no right to hold me.
What happened, Ring? Did your buddies duck out on you?
What do you mean my buddy stuck out of me?
Where were you flying to when you got picked up?
The other cop got my ticket. It says L.A. I got a right to go to L.A., haven't I?
Is that where your buddies are going?
What buddies? I was going alone.
Why weren't you going to Carson City?
Look, what's eating you two? You must have me mixed up with somebody else.
Your name is Ned Ring, isn't it?
Yeah, sure it is.
How do you think we found out what your name was?
Well, he had it all over me. The other cop got my wallet and stuff.
We had your name before you were picked up. We got it from Carson City.
What do you give me this stuff for?
Maybe he doesn't
Oh,
know.
the devil he doesn't.
You don't think you followed me all day without my catching on to it, do you?
Never saw you before.
How about a Dr. Malcolm Wish?
Or Ann Movius?
I'm not talking to you guys.
A couple of men are on their way from Carson City. Maybe you'd rather wait and talk to them.
I don't know anything about anybody in Carson City.
Yes, you do, Ring. It started out to be an unidentified trio that killed that bet maker in Carson City. But it isn't anymore. We've got your name, and we've got another one, Alan Movius.
And we've got a link between Ann Movius and the doctor that disappeared the other night.
He was held in an apartment on Van Ness. He took care of one of your buddies who'd been shot.
That's a kidnapping, right?
And now it looks like another murder. You tried to set it up like a suicide, but if he went off that bridge, he was pushed.
I don't know anything about that.
About what?
That, whatever you're talking about.
Get off it, Ring. You're tied up.
They left you, Ring, didn't they? They had to get out of that apartment. And while they had you off tailing me around town, they left.
And they left 100 leads pointing right at you. That's why you're here. They even left the newspaper with the story of that Carson City killing.
They really ratted out on you.
Yeah. Yeah, they sure did, didn't they?
All right, where'd they go?
I don't know. If I did, don't think I wouldn't tell you.
They pulled out before you saw me go into my hotel about 8:30.
Yeah, I guess it was it.
Who's the one that was wounded?
Mobius. We couldn't just leave him in Nevada. We should have. Kept yelling about a sister in Frisco was friends with a doctor, so we drove him all the way here.
How bad is Movius?
Pretty bad. Slug is inside him someplace.
How far do you think they could drive on him?
I didn't think he could be moved out of that apartment without killing him.
Where does the sister stand in all this?
No place. She was stuck. Seeing her brother like that, she couldn't think of anything but him. She lied to the doc. She told him she got hurt to get him over. And Gould and me woke up.
Gould. He's the third man?
Yeah. He's the one who did the gun work in Carson City. We knew we couldn't let the doc go unless Movius died or else got better so we could get out of here. We was trapped more than the doc was. That's why I had a plan on his house and picked you up.
I think you're talking straight with us, Ring. I hope you are.
Haven't got much reason not to, have I?
Well, there must have been some talk about where you'd go if you had to leave.
We never did get to that. I knew where they were, brother, I tell you. And you can believe that. I'm not aching to take all this by myself.
He was able and willing to supply some more pertinent information, such as a description of the other man, Gould, and the make, model, and license number of the car they were driving. Even with that, it looked like the case would stretch over into the next day. But at 11:30, Lieutenant Hughes got a phone call from Petaluma, a small town some 30 miles north of San Francisco.
All that drugstore. Douglas was handed a prescription for a painkiller that he had his doubts about. It was filled out by a Dr. A. Wish. He called the sheriff's office, and they have a man on the customer. Yeah, this is probably it. Sheriff Hill was right behind us.
You get the layout of this place?
I guess all these motels are about the same. Driveway up the middle. Rooms on each side.
That puts number 12 on this side, I guess.
Yeah.
I wondered It was the one with the light showing under the curtain.
I put 2 men to watch this side, but I don't think there's a way out except the driveway.
All right, Sheriff. Well, I think we're ready to go in.
Number 12 was in the middle of the row of accommodations on the right. Only 3 of us went to the door, and none of us expected trouble. Certainly none of us expected the kind of trouble we found.
Yes,
Police. Where's Dr. Wish?
police. I am Dr. Wish.
I'll stay outside, Lieutenant.
All right, sir.
You all right, Dr. Wish?
Yes.
I was sort of surprised when you answered the door.
Where are the others? Ann Mobius, her brother, the man named Gould.
They're here
Where?
in the bedroom. I'd like to tell you I've killed them all.
Sit down, Dr. Wish.
I'm going to go take a look, Dollar.
Tell me what happened.
I killed them. When we left the city, I knew I would. I'd have to die myself. I told Gould only one thing would save Mobius and wrote the prescription, and I killed him with it. The wounded man with an injection, the others internally in water.
And Mobius, too?
And Mobius, too. With her brother. She was with him. She told me she wasn't. She told me she... I didn't believe. I didn't believe.
Dr. Wish.
She told me before she died. She...
Lieutenant Hughes. We have to get him to a doctor. He's got some of that stuff himself. Expense account item 2, miscellaneous $140.50. Item 3, same as item 1, transportation back to Hartford. Expense account total $577.40. Remarks? We got Dr. Wish to a doctor in time to save his life. So your policyholder, although alive, is also a triple murderer. He claims it was justifiable, but at the same time, it was premeditated, so there's a fine line to draw. What I keep remembering is that his daughter, Cecil, said he had reached the dangerous age. And I guess he had. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, stars Edmund O'Brien in the title role and is written by Gil Dowd. Edmund O'Brien can soon be seen in the Paramount Pictures production Warpath. Featured in tonight's cast were Jeanette Nolan, Virginia Gregg, Ray Hartman, Bill Boucher, Tony Barrett, and Lou Krugman. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, was transcribed in Hollywood by Jaime Del Valle. This is Dan Coverly inviting you to join us next week at the same time when Edmund O'Brien returns as...
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
For your security, for your country's security, invest regularly in United States defense bonds. Buy them automatically through the payroll savings plan where you work. For personal security, for America's defense. Now, let's all buy bonds. Elation and syncopation are the main elements of tonight's Bing Crosby show over most of these same CBS stations. No wonder. The Groner himself vocalizes and informalizes. And Bing's guests include Tommy Dorsey with some fancy licks on his slide trombone, hot violinist Joe Venuti, and that equally torrid songbird, Teresa Brewer. Tonight on the Bing Crosby Show, for it follows immediately over most of these same CBS stations. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as...
Johnny Dollar.
Oh, yes. This is Inspector Sailor, Scotland Yard.
Oh, yes, Inspector. Thanks for calling back. I understand you've been assigned to Scott jewel theft investigations?
Yes. Inspector Finley has been taken ill. I was given the case this morning. As a matter of fact, I just received the file with your request to telephone.
Well, that puts us about abreast then, Inspector. I got in from the States last night. I'd like to get together with you so we could compare notes.
Yes, splendid. Could you come to my office?
At your convenience.
Well, then, why don't you come right over? But first, Mr. Dollar, tell me, did the insurance company send you to London in the belief that the yard is no longer competent?
What?
We've been reminded, you know, that our reputation has fallen off badly since the Stone of Scorn was stolen. But perhaps you and I shall have better luck, huh?
Edmund O'Brien in a transcribed adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account. America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Home Office Financial Surety Company, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Hatchet House theft matter. Expense account item 1, $432.50, airfare and incidentals between Hartford and London, England. I arrived in the evening and learned by phone that the original inspector assigned to the case had been replaced. The next morning, I was in contact with his replacement, and at 10:30, I was directed to his office.
Here we are, sir. Inspector Sailors?
Yeah?
Mr. Dollar, sir.
Oh, yes. Come in, Mr. Dollar.
Thanks very much.
Right you are, sir.
Pleasure, Mr. Dollar.
How do you do, Inspector?
Now, speaking to an acquaintance of yours a few moments ago. Inspector Finch?
Oh, yes. Yes, I worked on a case with him over here last year. How is he?
Oh, quite well, thank you. He complimented you quite highly, sir.
Well, that's very nice of him. But as I remember it, I think I was more of a burden than a help to him.
Yeah, I doubt that. Well, I suppose we should face the situation at hand.
Yeah. I brought an accurate description of all the jewelry insured by Mrs. Scott.
Oh, splendid.
But the cable that reported the theft wasn't quite clear as to which pieces were missing.
Well, Inspector Finley's information on that score is quite accurate, I think. Yeah, here we are.
Oh, thank you.
And he's covered the methods used in the commission of the crime quite thoroughly, I think. I'm going to spend the afternoon in Crime Index. I should probably be able to link the method with a few of our known criminals.
Gentleman's investigation, huh?
I suppose so. Rather tedious, but quite often successful.
I'd like to see Mrs. Scott myself, if it's all right with you.
Oh, of course. I shall arrange a car and a driver for you. Will early afternoon be suitable?
Well, thanks, but there's no reason to go to that bother, is there? Isn't she staying here in London?
No, she let a place near Seven Oaks in Surrey, about 20 miles south of here. Quite an historic establishment, I'm told. It's called Hatchet House.
Before I left London that afternoon, Inspector Sailors and I pulled the few facts we had. I was able to tell him that Mrs. Marcella Scott, reputedly a wealthy Texas widow, was actually slightly on her uppers as far as ready cash went. She had sold some jewelry the previous year for considerably less than its insured value. He gave me the news that Mrs. Scott frequently had been seen in the company of another American tourist named Norman King. And together, we figured the loss at slightly over $100,000. Hatchet House was a medium-sized pile of ivy-draped masonry just on the northern fringe of Seven Oaks. In addition to history, it boasted some seclusion, being set back from the road in the middle of a walled garden. Mrs. Scott was in the village, but was expected back momentarily, and would I care to come in and wait?
The library is quite comfortable if you'd care to go in there.
In a minute, thanks. Your name is Garrett?
Yes, sir.
You've been employed here during Mrs. Scott's whole stay?
Oh, yes, sir. She bought my services from the other side. I'm not without recommendations in Seven Oaks, sir.
And you must know pretty well who's been in the house, at parties and so on.
I'd say so, sir. But they've all been genuine people. Class, you know. I wouldn't say that any of them would stoop to thievery.
How many other servants are there?
2 that live in. There's Millie Hankey. She's a maid. There's old Mr. Minns. He's the gardener. He's got a cottage out back.
Mrs. Scott was entertaining night before last when the jewelry was stolen. Had she hired any extra servants?
No, sir.
Oh, thanks, Garrett.
Oh, there's Millie. Millie, come here, do. Here's an American gentleman to see you.
How do you do, sir?
You're Miss Hankey?
Yes, sir.
He's come all the way from the other side, Millie, about Mrs. Scott's jewels being stolen.
It's a scandal, that's what it is. But I don't suppose you'd say it's the only one.
Watch your tongue, Millie.
Watching it.
I'll be in the pantry, sir, if I can be of any more service to you.
Thanks, Garrett. I will want the names of the people who were here the other night.
Right, sir. I'll write them on a paper.
He's got a nerve telling me to watch my tongue. A scandal's a scandal, genuine people or not, and he knows it.
Just what did you mean, Millie?
I suppose the servant's paid to keep her eyes open and her mouth closed. But I haven't been a servant long. I'm only a village girl from Penrith, but I know right from wrong.
You don't approve of some of the things?
No, I don't. And I'm going to leave when I get married. Maybe next month.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. He's a good man.
I'm sure of that.
So big and strong. Lots of fun. We'll have an inn of our own someday, and I won't have to be a servant anymore.
I wish you a lot of luck.
Thank you, sir.
I want you to know, Millie, that anything you say to me will be kept in strict confidence.
Yes, sir. You look like the honest kind.
Now, what things especially didn't you approve of? Something that's caught your eye could be important.
I don't know, but one thing. Being a widow at her age, it's indecent, that's what. And I've seen them making jokes in front of the photo of her poor dead husband. He was older, you know.
Yes, I knew that.
I can't say she hastened his end, but I can't say she's sorry he's buried and gone either.
Who made jokes in front of his photograph?
Mr. King.
Norman King. He was here the night of the theft, wasn't he?
The night of the theft. He's been here more than he's elsewhere. He's a filthy leech, if you ask me. I'm only a country girl, but there's a look in his eyes I didn't mistake. Not for a moment. He's slimy.
I wish you'd think about the party night before last, Millie. You were here on the ground floor through most of it, weren't you?
Yes, sir, the whole drunken time.
I wish you'd try and remember if anybody went upstairs and stayed long enough to have gone into Mrs. Scott's room and forced open the drawer and stolen the jewelry.
I'll try, sir.
Don't mistake me. We aren't sure that's what happened. It could just as well have been an outsider who knew a party was going on and had a way of entry, or even somebody passing by who found the rear door unlocked.
I'll try, sir.
Thanks, Millie. I won't keep you from your work any longer. I'll just wait in the library for Mrs. Scott. I waited an hour until the butler, Garrett, notified me that Marcella Scott had phoned. She had met some friends in the village, had driven to London with them, and wouldn't return until the next morning. I could find her any time after 9 that night at Claridge's Hotel. I spent another 20 minutes with the servants and left for London and Inspector Saylor's office.
Well, I expected you to return before this, Mr. Dollar.
I hope I didn't keep the car and driver too long.
No, not at all. Especially if the time was well spent.
Most of it was wasted. While I waited for Mrs. Scott in Hatchet House, she was on her way to London.
Huh? She's here now?
Claridge's. She came in with friends.
Well, doesn't seem to be upset over her loss, does she?
Nor the loss of her husband either, I take it.
Huh?
I'm interested in the association between her and this Norman King.
I see. Then you did have a talk with Miss Mildred Hankey, the maid, hmm?
Yes, I did. Why? Did you?
No. Inspector Finlay did.
What did he say about it?
Well, she suffered from an insane hate or jealousy because of this Mr. King.
I didn't see it quite that way.
That she berated the friendship shared by Mrs. Scott and him. This is what he jotted down. Investigate possibility of collusion between Hankey girl and King.
Well, as I said, I didn't see it that way, but maybe he hit something.
Perhaps.
King's from New York. I'm going to make a phone call, see what I can learn about his background. In the meantime, I hope to meet him. At least I think he's here with Mrs. Scott.
You're going to see her, then?
Her message was that I could any time after 9. I plan to be available about 2 minutes after.
I shall be interested to hear.
Did you get anything from your files?
Nothing. Dreadfully and absolutely nothing.
At 5 minutes before 9, I arrived at Mrs. Scott's hotel. On the stroke of 9, I phoned her suite, And at 3 minutes after, I met her, a striking honey blonde with tanned skin and an athletic figure that dressed her clothes nicely.
I'm sorry I missed you in the country, Mr. Dollar.
It's all right. I should have phoned.
I suppose you're here to save what money you can for the insurance company in case my things aren't recovered.
Insurance companies don't operate that way, Mrs. Scott. They can afford not to.
Please sit down.
Thank you.
It's the expected thing, I guess. But I suspect one of the servants had something to do with it.
Do you have any special reason for that suspicion?
Oh, they're strange people. I don't know anything about them. I've had them 2 months, and I've never been comfortable with them around me.
Anything else?
Well, the more I've thought of it, the more it seems to make sense. The house was full of people to be suspected. One of them could have taken advantage of that.
The men at Scotland Yard say that it took between 15 and 20 minutes to force that drawer open the way it was done. Did you miss either of your servants for that length of time?
Not that I remember. It got a little confused by 11 or so.
Do you suspect anybody else? Any of your guests?
Oh, good Lord, no. Most of them have a lot more than I do.
Did you know Norman King in the States, or did you meet him here?
Are you telling me suspect Norman?
I asked when you met him.
Why?
I wondered if you knew him well enough to know he has a record as a forger.
I don't believe it.
Checks. He signed the name of another widow. A copy of the record is being mailed to me.
I don't care. Doesn't make any difference. Norman didn't steal my jewelry. He wouldn't do that to me.
I wonder how many times the other widow said that.
You don't understand me. Norman and I are the same kind of people. You don't think I married a 70-year-old Texan for love, do you? Well, Norman's made up his mind what he wants out of life, too. He's talked about it. He doesn't care how he gets it, but he wouldn't take it from me.
Sure. Well, I wanted to meet you, Mrs. Scott, and I have. Norman King checked into the Dorchester yesterday. He checked out today, and now Scotland Yard can't find him. If you hear from him, maybe you'd better let us know. Johnny Dollar.
Inspector Sailor.
Oh, hello. I'm sorry I took so long to answer. I just got up to my room.
Yes, well, I spoke to the clerk at the desk. He thought you might be going up and asked him to ring. You saw Mrs. Scott?
Yes, I didn't learn much, but I don't think she's mixed up in it.
No. Well, perhaps I have some news for you.
What's that?
I just received a report of a killing in Limehouse. The constable described a piece of jewelry found at the scene, and it corresponds quite closely to the description of Mrs. Scott's emerald brooch.
Oh? Who was killed?
No identification yet. A man. I'm driving over. I wondered if you'd like me to pick you up.
Yes, I would. I'll be waiting in front of my hotel.
We will return you to the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar, in just a moment. What is the secret of Dr. Walter? Sorry, we don't have the answer, but we know where it can be found. Tomorrow night, over most of these same CBS stations, with a tale well calculated to keep you in suspense. The unique theater of thrills called Suspense looks into the eerie matter of Dr. Walter's private life. Another thrilling CBS suspense drama tomorrow night. And now with our star, Edmund O'Brien, we return you to the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
By the time we got to the dismal Coldwater flat near the Thames, the inevitable crowd had gathered in the street. The body was one flight up in a grubby room that showed plenty of signs that a struggle had taken place. The man obviously had been killed by a blow on the back of the head. He'd been identified by the landlady as George Kenzie, the renter of the room.
It was a bootblack who discovered the body. Said this George Kenzie owed him some money and wouldn't pay. He came up here tonight and found him dead. I found the brooch myself just under the chair there, sir.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Constable.
Right, sir. I'll be outside. Here now, you people that don't belong here, don't crowd the corridor. Move along now. Come along, move along.
Is there any doubt in your mind, Mr. Dollar, that this is Mrs. Scott's brooch?
None at all. Look, the jeweler's mark on the back.
Well, then, we've made some progress. I hardly think we'll be so fortunate as to find the 4 remaining pieces here.
No. Offhand, it looks like there was trouble over dividing the loot, and the winner took the rest, don't you think?
Quite possibly. Norman King?
I'd feel better if he was found.
Yeah, so would I. Matter of fact, I wish you'd keep your American criminals in America. We've quite enough to keep us busy without them.
Hands off me.
Hello.
I haven't done nothing. I was going to Mr. Kinsey's digs of my own free will, and I don't need no help from nobody.
Not half, you don't. Miss Glory Stokes, Inspector. She said she'd come to pay a visit to Mr. Kinsey, but she made off the other way when she heard the news.
Well, come in, Miss Stokes.
I will not. Not with him lying there like that.
Very well. Constable, ask Miss Stokes if she'll please accompany you to the yard. Mr. Dollar and I'll see her there.
I suppose it's understood that when you're with Scotland Yard, you do as Scotland Yard does. We didn't search the place, but we learned it was empty of any more jewelry after a crew of technical men collected every possible bit of physical evidence in the room and started it towards the yard's various laboratories. The results of their meticulous tests, comparisons, and examination fell into place later. We asked a few questions there without getting anything, and then went back to the inspector's office, where Glory Stokes waited for us.
It's time, I must say.
I trust we haven't kept you waiting too long. This is Mr. Dollar, American investigator.
How do you do?
What would he be investigating that would concern me?
We'll explain the whole thing to you, Miss Stokes.
It ain't Miss Stokes. But something tells me I'm going to wish it was.
You're married?
I am. That's why I was going to George Kinsey's. I haven't seen me hubby for 3 days. And I was going to ask George if he knew where the rotter was.
What's your husband's name?
Leonard Stokes.
You haven't seen him in 3 days.
That's right.
Couldn't he give you any idea where he was going?
No, why should he? I don't care where he goes, and he knows it.
But you said you were looking for him.
I was. If he's going to desert his poor wife, she's got a right to know, hasn't she?
Yeah, I suppose she has.
I take it he spent quite a lot of time with this George Kinsey.
Yeah, too much if you ask me. George was no good. He was a thief. I knew he'd end up dead like this. And if I told Leonard once, I told him 100 that he'd get into trouble if he chummed with him. He is in trouble. Ain't he in trouble?
We aren't sure yet, Mrs. Stokes.
What kind of trouble?
Some jewelry was stolen from a woman in Seven Oaks.
Jewels, oh,
One of the pieces was found in George Kinsey's room. There's still almost $100,000 worth missing.
More than 30,000 pounds, Mrs. Stokes.
30,000. George did that.
It looks like it.
There's a possibility that your husband was involved also.
Leonard? Don't make me laugh. He wouldn't have the brains.
The next morning, armed with pictures of both Stokes and the dead man, Inspector Sailors and I drove back to Seven Oaks. He dropped me at Hatchet House and went on to cover the village himself. Mrs. Scott received me in the library.
Good morning, Mr. Dollar.
Mrs. Scott, you must have left London early this morning.
Yes, I did. Have you made any progress?
Some, yes. Have you heard anything?
I was very unhappy after you left last night.
Why? Did you suddenly get lonesome for your jewels?
I think you know why. I made a confession to you. I let you see what I really am. I never do that.
It's all in confidence. Forget it.
I've been trying to. I got a radiogram from Norman King. It arrived here late yesterday afternoon.
Did you notify Scotland Yard?
No, I know you asked me to, but I didn't think it was necessary. He's on his way back to New York. He wouldn't do that with stolen jewelry, would he?
It would be stupid, but I'll want the name of the ship.
I'll give it to you. He inferred that he knew his record would come to light because of the theft and that he'd feel better leaving England before he was asked to leave. He's a stupid, irresponsible dunce.
Yeah. I have some photographs I want you to look at. Here, I'll spread them out on the table.
Who are they?
Pictures of this man may not be quite lifelike because he was dead when they were taken.
Who is he?
His name is George Kinsey. He was found beaten to death last night. Your emerald brooch was on the floor near him, so we're assuming he was killed because of your jewelry. You ever seen this man around here?
No, not that I remember.
I want you to remember one way or the other. It's possible that this man just received the stolen property from someone else, but if we can find somebody in the house or in the village who recognizes him, then we'll feel sure that he actually was the thief, or one of them anyway.
I'm trying to be sure.
What about the other one?
I don't think I've seen either of them.
And if you'll leave the room, I'd like to talk to your servants.
You're going out of your way to be nasty. You thoroughly despise me, don't you?
No. What I dislike is the fact that the physical part of you wasn't matched up with some mental apparatus that deserved it. You asked me a personal question, Mrs. Scott. I want you to look at the photographs and think. It's important that we find out if you have ever seen either of these men in Seven Oaks.
Which one is deceased, sir?
This one.
How large was he?
A little under 6 feet. Miss Hankey?
I don't like looking at them, sir. I don't think I've seen either one of them, though.
There's something about this one, sir.
George Kenzie?
Was he plump?
No, I don't think you'd say plump. He was heavy, stocky.
There's something about him, sir. Can't put my finger quite on it, but there's something.
Could he have made deliveries here?
Who brought the luggage, Millie, the day after Mrs. Scott arrived?
Oh, I don't think it was him. Or this one either. They had their own lorry with a sign on it. Have you forgot?
I'm sure of it, sir. There's something about this one, but I can't remember what.
Well, thanks very much, both of you. If you do remember something, please notify Scotland Yard. In the village, Inspector Sailors had found a few people who thought they recognized George Kenzie and 2 who were positive. None of them had recognized Leonard Stokes. So by the time we had left Seven Oaks, we were fairly sure that Kenzie had been actively involved. But since he was dead, being sure didn't mean any progress. Nothing further developed that day, although in London a stream of suspects was questioned. The next morning, the situation hadn't changed, but I began to feel that in the face of the movement of Scotland Yard, a criminal would have to have more than brains and more than luck to escape. At 2 that afternoon, a report was phoned in that a man answering the description of Leonard Stokes had been seen boarding a train in Waterloo Station and followed to his compartment. Another call delayed the train so that Inspector Sailors and I were able to get aboard.
Here we are. If you don't mind, Mr. Dollar.
It's your island, Inspector.
Yes, thank you. Scotland Yard.
What?
Are you Leonard Stokes?
Am I who? No, I'm not.
Who are you then, sir?
Well, I don't see how you've a right to
You
go...
must have identification. Let me see it, please.
All right. I'm Leonard Stokes. Who's he?
An American, Mr. Dollar, sent here to recover Mrs. Scott's stolen property.
You know where it is, Stokes?
Answer him.
It's all right. All right, I know when I'm beat. Yes, I know where it is. But I didn't kill George.
How did you know he was dead, Mr. Stokes?
Well, I tried to telephone him. That's how I found out.
He was killed because of the jewelry, wasn't he, Stokes?
I don't know. I don't know why he was killed.
When was the last time you saw him, Mr. Stokes?
Tuesday night.
You went to Seven Oaks?
I went to Seven Oaks, yes. Look, I'm willing to cooperate. Inspector, I'll tell you my part of it.
Well, that will make it a great deal less difficult for all of us.
Yes, sir. Well, he asked me to go to Seven Oaks with him. I didn't know what he was up to. I thought we was just going for a little drive.
Out of 5 pieces missing, Stokes, we found 1 in Kenzie's room. Now, if you know where the rest of them are, you must have known what he was up to.
Well, if I had, I wouldn't have gone. That's the truth. Before I knew it, he stopped off at this Hatchet house and told me to wait in the motor.
Well, he must have explained why he stopped.
Well, he said he had a friend to see, a gardener.
Gardener at Hatchet House?
That's what he told me. He came back in a while, and then we drove off.
And you still didn't know what was happening?
No.
When did you?
When it was too late. On the road back to London, he told me. He told me whether I knew it or not, I'd just stolen some jewels. Well, I thought he was joking. Then he showed them to me, and he says, "Who's going to believe you, Len boy, when you say you didn't know nothing about it?" Oh, what could I do?
What did you do?
I drove back to London.
Why was there only 1 piece of jewelry in Kenzie's room?
Well, that's all he took. Said he wanted to give it to a chum.
And you took care of the rest of it?
Well, I was afraid to do anything else, sir. He kept telling me I was complicated in it.
Stokes' innocence, as far as the robbery was concerned, became a little embarrassing even to him by the time we got him off the train and back to Scotland Yard. But his denial of any knowledge of Kenzie's murder was borne out, A, by an alibi that proved him innocent, and B, the result of one of the laboratory tests mentioned earlier. Traces of lip rouge found on the dead man's clothing pointed the way to the murderer.
Mrs. Scott is resting in her room and left orders not to be disturbed.
We won't disturb her, Garrett. Is Miss Hankey here?
She's in the pantry, sir.
Would you show us?
This way, please.
Thank you, Garrett.
Oh, Mr. Dollar.
This is Inspector Sailors from Scotland Yard, Miss Hankey. Miss Hankey?
How do you do? You've come after me, haven't you?
Yes, I think we have.
I don't mind. I don't care about anything now.
You did recognize the photographs of George Kenzie, didn't you?
Recognize them? Yes, I suppose so. I remembered. I remembered the man I fell in love with. I told you I was going to marry, didn't I, Mr. Dollar?
You met him in Seven Oaks?
Yes. He told me he lived in London. And I felt like a child. I'd never gotten to know anyone who lived in London. When you're born in Penrith, you never do. He was so nice. He could talk so I could listen all night.
Did he question you concerning Mrs. Scott?
He took me to London. And he told me he wanted to marry me. And I believed him.
Millie, we're sorry.
I wanted a husband the same as every girl. But he was lying. He knew I was a servant. And he found out about things.
Then, inadvertently, you told him about the entertainment Tuesday night.
The party? He said he was going to come. I left the rear door unlocked because I was going to give him some refreshments. I thought he hadn't come. But he had. He lied to me. That's why I killed him.
You went to London last night?
Yes. He told me to leave London. He told me to go back to Penrith. Then I knew that he'd lied to me and that he'd stolen the jewelry. He called me a stupid country girl. And that's when I hit him. I hit him and hit him. Because it was true. That's all I am. A servant. And I'll never be anything else.
Expense account item 2, miscellaneous, $317.75. Item 3, same as item 1, transportation back to Hartford. Expense account total, $1,182.75. Remarks? The jewelry was recovered, but in spite of its value, that didn't seem too important. The importance, as I saw it, lay in the complete reversal of values. Mildred Hankey, who only wanted goodness, had found badness. And Marcella Scott? Marcella Scott left for Capri the following day. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, stars Edmund O'Brien in the title role and is written by Gil Dowd with music by Eddie Dunstetter. Edmund O'Brien can soon be seen in the Paramount Pictures production Warpath. Featured in tonight's cast were John McIntyre, Ben Wright, Tudor Owen, Jeanette Nolan, and Virginia Gregg. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, is transcribed in Hollywood by Jaime Del Valle. This is Dan Cubberly inviting you to join us next week at this time when Edmund O'Brien returns as...
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Tonight's the last Bing Crosby show of the season on CBS. What's more, Ken Murray, his pretty blonde songbird, Laurie Anders, and folk singer Burl Ives are all on hand to help the groaner ring down the curtain. Stay tuned for the Bing Crosby Show next on most of these same CBS stations. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System. From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as...
Johnny Dollar.
This is Lieutenant Shark. Did you leave a message for me to call?
Yes, I did, Lieutenant. I want you...
It was all bundled up by the time I got it. Snyder got your name and what hotel, but I never did find out who you are and what you wanted with me.
It's about the Alonzo Chapman killing.
Oh. Well, what's your interest in that?
I'm an insurance investigator. I was sent out here from Hartford, Connecticut to see what I could learn.
Oh, you were? Well, how'd you get out here so fast?
We got the news at about 8 last night. I was on a plane by midnight and in Los Angeles by noon today.
Must be tired. I don't have any more than I had last night. I suppose you want to talk to me, though.
Yeah, I'd like to.
All right. Come on over. But give me an hour so I can get some lunch.
Edmund O'Brien in a transcribed adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Home Office Tri-State Insurance Group, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Alonzo Chapman matter. Expense account item 1, $208.50, airfare and incidentals between Hartford, Connecticut and Los Angeles, California. After a delay of about an hour or so, I was able to make an appointment with Lieutenant Jim Schock, the detective in charge of the case. I met him at about 2:15, and he brought me up to date.
Chapman was registered at the Quincy Hotel. He met this girl in the hotel bar at about 7 last night. They left together about, got it, 7:45. Turned in the alley to get to the parking lot where a car was parked, and that's where he was shot, in the alley.
Was it robbery?
No. He was well-heeled, too, over $300. Had in his coat pocket.
What about this girl? We didn't hear about her.
We did. Norma Sale. Picked up on a shoplifting charge last year. But she got a job and stayed out of trouble since. Pretty little thing. Born in Nebraska. She says she met an actor in a road company back there. He told her he'd introduce her to some important people in Hollywood, and maybe she could... Well, you know how it goes.
Yeah, but I wonder if Chapman's wife is going to. She's on her way out here. How long had this girl known him?
Well, she says she just met him last night. I think that's what she said. She was transferred to county jail this morning at 11:30 in material witness. I suppose you want to talk to her.
Yeah, I'd like to.
And so would I. Might as well go on over. Because it's growing too fast. That's why. We got too many people. We got too many cars. Too much of everything but streets. It's a mess. Of course, I don't know anything about Hartford. I've never been there.
Well, it's a little slower paced than Los Angeles, but it's got its problems.
I suppose every place has something.
Yes, she is, Lieutenant.
Oh.
We just called Cassidy when they want to send her back to herself.
Yeah, all right. I'll do that.
Thanks.
Oh, come along here, Norma. This man is Mr. Dollar. He's an insurance investigator from back east.
How do you do, Miss Ann?
Hello.
You can just sit down. How you feeling today?
Not very good.
I tried to talk to you last night after Mr. Chapman was shot. You remember?
I sort of half remember. I went to pieces, I guess.
Yeah, you did. Couldn't get anything that even sounded like a statement from you. That's why I had you held, so we could talk it over today.
Sure. I don't know anything. We left and then it happened.
How long had you known Mr. Chapman?
I just met him last night.
He made regular visits to Los Angeles. Are you sure you didn't meet him before?
Of course I'm sure. Why would I lie about that? We just struck up a friendship last night.
How did that happen?
Well, I dropped into the bar at the Quincy for a drink, and he started to talk to me.
What all did he say?
It was just one of those things that happens all the time. I knew it was a pitch, but he seemed like a nice guy. He just didn't want to be alone. He asked me if I knew any good places to eat, and I told him about a place I like out towards Hollywood, so he asked me if I'd show him.
You ought to be more careful who you get friendly with. Maybe I'd better turn that around and say you ought to be more careful about who knows you're getting friendly with somebody.
I guess I don't get you.
We're looking for a reason somebody would want to kill Chapman. Maybe a man friend of yours?
Well, it couldn't be anything like that. I don't have any steady boyfriends.
No, that's not saying there isn't somebody who wants to be one, is it?
There isn't anybody, and that's the truth. If it had been somebody I knew, I would have recognized him, wouldn't I?
And it's possible that you might want to protect him if you did know him.
I didn't know him. There isn't anybody who'd do anything like that.
Now, I can't hold with that, Norma. You're young, you're pretty. Why, I should think there'd be a bunch of young bucks after you. Boys from that store where you work, maybe.
I tell you, there isn't. It's the truth. There isn't. If there was, I'd tell you.
Well, maybe you would.
We've got to find a reason that Chapman was killed.
I don't know. It wasn't because he was with me.
All right now, Norma. Don't get all upset again. You've got to remember some other things.
I hope you aren't holding anything back, Norma. You know that we can learn the truth from other people.
Sure I do. Ask the girls I work with. Ask Jeannie Stevens. She ought to know. She's lived with me for almost a year.
All right, Norma. Now, when you and this Chapman decided on a place to go for dinner, you left the hotel. You started for your car in the parking lot, huh?
Yes.
You turned into the alley, which was a shorter trip than going around the corner, and this gunman was waiting there.
It wasn't dark, was it?
No, not quite.
How far down the alley was this man?
Well, it was not very good at measuring, but must have been about halfway to the parking lot.
There's a big trash box there behind one of the buildings. This man was waiting behind the box, and when you came by, he stepped out, fired 3 shots, and ran away.
And it was light enough so that you could get a good look at him?
Yes, it was darker in the alley, but I'd have recognized anybody I knew.
Would you remember if you saw him again?
I'm not sure. Maybe I would.
Now, Norma, it's up to us to figure out how come this killer was waiting there, where he was. It beats me how he knew Chapman was going to pass by that box.
I don't know.
You can see how odd it looks, Norma. If he didn't know Chapman was coming that way, he must have known that you were.
I don't know how it happened. I'm telling the truth. Maybe somebody heard us talking in the bar.
Heard enough to know you and Chapman would go through the alley?
Maybe somebody could have. I don't remember exactly how it went, but I told him where my car was parked. Yes, I said just down the alley, I remember.
And then did you leave?
No, not right away. We had another drink.
Well, that'd take about 10 or 15 minutes, I suppose. Well, how about it, Dollar?
I don't think I have anything more. Thanks, Norma.
All right.
I'll get Cassidy to take you down. I'd like to send you home, Norma. Maybe tomorrow. You know how it goes.
To both Lieutenant Shock and me, the jealousy motive was still first choice. As a matter of fact, at that point, it was the only choice. Nothing in Alonzo Chapman's room or among his effects gave a hint of a murder motive. The Cleveland police had been requested to send anything they had on him, and local men were at work checking his Los Angeles business associates and his movements. Shock left to question Norma Sale's roommate, and I went back to satisfy myself on the beginning of it all. I waited for the evening bartender at the Quincy Hotel.
Now I'm not busy. We won't get crowded for another hour.
How about last night? Were you crowded about 7:30?
Oh, yes, well. If you'd asked me about anybody else in the place, I couldn't tell you a thing. But I remember this little blonde dame and this guy Chapman.
I'm glad to hear that. Usually doesn't happen this way.
Yeah, I suppose not, but I'll tell you how it was. You see, Chapman had been in a hotel for a few days, you know.
Yeah, I got in Friday last week.
Well, I'm not sure when I first met him, but he'd drop in for an early drink, like, 5:45, 5 o'clock. Yeah, we talk a little bit, then he'd go up to his room and come back around 7 and stay for another hour or so. I tell you, it was bound to happen.
What do you mean?
Oh, not his getting killed, not that part of it. I mean a little blonde. I didn't snoop what he was saying to her or anything, but when she came in, the bar stools were all taken. Chapman spots her and gives her his place.
How long had he been there?
Just a couple of minutes. I hadn't gotten around to taking his order yet, but when I did, he ordered for the both of them. Then after that round, they moved to one of the booths.
Did you happen to notice another man who could have been interested in them and could have been close enough to overhear them?
Oh, no, gee, the place was full. I didn't notice. Or maybe the bar girl did, Grace Curcio. She'll be in at 5:30 if you want to talk to her.
I'll have to come back later. Chapman's widow is due to arrive in about 20 minutes.
That masher had a wife?
Yeah, how about that?
Oh, I'm no stuffed shirt, but if that guy acted this way in all the towns he hit, she's better off without him. Now, I'll ask Grace if you want. What's your hotel?
The Larkin. If she does remember something about it, I'd appreciate a call. Huh?
Sure. My name is Howard.
Thanks a lot, Howard. See you later.
Lieutenant Shock.
Lieutenant, this is Dollar.
You got anything to report, Dollar?
Nothing that does us any good. Mrs. Chapman just checked into the hotel. I'm in the lobby there now. How did you make out with Norma's roommate?
Oh, just fine. She seems like a level-headed sort of girl. She says Norma hasn't gone with any one particular man for a year. That one's name was Clyde Mills. Served a 6-month sentence on some charge or other, not important what, but they're all washed up. She says he's not even in town, but we'll look for him anyway.
Yeah, I'm going up to talk to the widow if it's all right with you.
Sure, go right ahead. Make a suspect out of her if you can. We need some.
Could be. From what I hear, she had a motive, not counting the insurance money. But I don't know whether she knew it or not. I'll check with you later. Meeting Mrs. Chapman was quite a surprise to me. I naturally expected to find the widow approximately the same age as the dead man, something near 50. But she wasn't. She looked to be only a few years over 30, if that.
Don't feel like you have to try and make things easy for me, Mr. Dollar. You don't.
All right, Mrs. Chapman.
Did he suffer much?
No, he died almost instantly.
If it had to happen, I'm glad it went that way then. I hope you understand.
I'm trying to. I take it you weren't too fond of your husband.
I wasn't. And it would be stupid for me to tell you anything else or to act any other way than I am acting.
We're still looking for the reason your husband was killed.
You said he was taking this girl someplace.
He was, but we haven't been able to make anything out of that yet. She says there's nobody who would kill out of jealousy.
I saw her picture in the paper.
We doubted it, too, but our closest friend wouldn't have any reason to protect someone who had tried to kill Miss Sale. She said there was nobody.
Well, there are other men who'd have good reason to kill him. You didn't know him, did you?
No, I'd never seen him.
He was good looking. Not tall, but he sort of looked it. He took care of himself. The iron gray hair. He was better looking when he passed 45 than he ever was when he was young.
I was surprised that you were so young, Mrs. Chapman.
That's why. He was attractive to women. My bad luck was leaving Cleveland and letting myself get roped into a marriage. I found out about one of these girls, and then he started bragging about all the others.
You mean it's possible that a man followed him to Los Angeles from someplace else and killed him?
I don't know, but I do know that he must have hurt a lot of people. Well, he's through hurting me. I've stuck it out because I knew this was going to happen someday. Every time I've read about a murder like this, I knew it would happen to him. Now it has. Now I own a house. I have a bank account. Insurance money. I'm finally getting something from my marriage.
I tried to phone Lieutenant Shark a report on my meeting with the overly honest Mrs. Chapman, but he was out of his office getting the teletyped answer to the request he'd made for information from the Cleveland police. So I cabbed over to see him.
Now, I'm not saying that what Mrs. Chapman says isn't possible, but I don't want to go off half-cocked on a wild goose chase.
I didn't think you'd like it. I don't either. Chapman came here from Fresno by train, so say it would have to be some guy from there.
We'll see why he didn't. Well, say he didn't kill him in Fresno because he thought he wouldn't draw suspicion down here.
How did this guy locate him? Chapman didn't reserve a room at the Quincy. He usually stayed someplace else, so he'd have to be followed.
It's no good, Dollar. Why, you couldn't expect an inexperienced man from Fresno to do a job of tailing like that through Union Station from there to the Quincy and all this traffic? It's possible, I suppose.
You going to check it, then?
I guess so.
Probably wouldn't be too hard to get a list of the people who got on that train at Fresno.
Yeah. List is hard up for motives. Now we got them all over the country. He was old enough to know better.
Lieutenant.
What?
Here's a follow-up on the stuff from Cleveland.
Oh, thanks.
Right.
Well, this is darn nice of those boys.
Get something?
Say, Chapman phoned Cleveland that day. He checked in, didn't he?
Yeah, it was Friday. Why?
Look at this. Seems like his missus was seeing a lot of a man named Nicholson. He's known to have left Cleveland on Friday night, and he hasn't been seen since. I like this a whole lot better. Yeah, this could be what we wanted. A man with a motive who knew where Chapman was. You think it's time you met the honest widow?
We will return you to the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar, in just a moment. Melody knows no boundary, neither does joy, as Russ Emery and Judy Lynn sing their hearts into yours and Ray Bloch's orchestra and chorus offer the music that's great from the 48. It's the full-hour Ray Bloch music party every Friday night over most of these same CBS stations. Listen for it this Friday, a whole hour of the songs America loves, the music the nation dances to and lives by, on Ray Bloch's Music Party. Now with our star, Edmund O'Brien, we return you to the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Mrs. Chapman, this is Lieutenant Shark investigating your husband's murder.
How do you do?
Glad to meet you, Miss Chapman. Well, I'm sorry about the circumstances.
It's not very pleasant.
Mrs. Chapman, we never did get around to talking about your friend, Carl Nicholson, did we?
What do you mean?
Well, you told me about some of the improvements your husband's death was going to bring you, but you didn't mention Carl Nicholson.
Please. I know I sounded hard when I talked to you. I shouldn't have said some of the things.
I thought you were being honest.
I was. Too honest, I'm afraid.
I don't think so.
Mrs. Chapman, I've been in touch with the police back in your hometown. They found out somehow about this Carl Nicholson. First, they said you'd been seeing quite a lot of him, especially when your husband was out of town. Is that right?
Yes, it's true.
Yeah. What were your feelings toward Nicholson at that time? That is, prior to your husband's death.
I'm fond of Carl. I never made any secret of that. He's my age. We have a lot of things in common.
You know where he is?
Why, in Cleveland.
Oh, well, that's funny. The police told me he was out of town.
I don't know what this means. I don't understand.
You didn't know he left town?
No, I didn't.
Now, if you were fond of each other and you had all these things in common, it seems to me you deserve to be told if he was just going to up and leave town.
When did you see him last, Mrs. Chapman?
It was last week.
Friday, by any chance?
No. It was before then. It was Wednesday or Thursday. Why are you asking me these things?
The police back there went on to tell me that this Nicholson left town on Friday.
The Cleveland police? Why should they even care about Carl?
Because I told them that on Friday your husband had telephoned you from the hotel where he was staying here in Los Angeles. Isn't that right?
Yes, but I don't know what you mean.
Didn't you see Nicholson on Friday after you talked to your husband?
No. Do you mean that you think I told him where Al was staying and that he came out here
Now, Mrs. Chapman, we didn't say we thought anything, but it's our job to solve this murder. We aren't saying we think you and him planned the whole thing and that he hopped out of here the first thing after he learned where your husband was staying. But there are a lot of things that aren't clear in our minds.
The theory you gave me about all these wronged men around the country didn't hold up too well, Mrs. Chapman.
It wasn't a theory. I just told you what I'd been thinking.
You said you'd been waiting for it to happen. But the way we see it, the way your husband was killed, where he was killed, makes a jealous out-of-town man seem too far-fetched.
But we're looking into it. Don't you worry about that.
Do you have a reason to think that Carl has been in Los Angeles?
We're covering the possibility that he might have been.
Maybe you just mentioned the Quincy Hotel in passing, casually, so you hardly remember.
No. I haven't seen Carl or talked to him since before Al called me. I didn't tell him.
Why did he happen to leave town on Friday?
I told you I don't know. I didn't know he'd left.
Well, with all these things in common, what did you think when the news about your husband reached Cleveland? Didn't you wonder about why you hadn't talked to this Nicholson all those days?
Yes, I did wonder.
Yeah, now, why didn't you tell us all that without all this back and forth?
Because it would have sounded so awful.
Do you think you improved things by holding back?
I don't know. Maybe I didn't. The last time I saw Carl was on Wednesday. We had a fight and he walked out.
You can prove that's the last time you saw him?
Prove? I haven't been thinking about anything like that. We fought over the same thing for almost a year. Carl wanted me to get a divorce, and I wouldn't.
Because you were waiting for your husband to get killed. Did you ever tell Carl that?
Yes.
You tell him that during this fight on Wednesday?
I think so.
But you didn't talk to him after that?
No.
Could you have learned someplace else where your husband was staying?
I don't know. I don't know who else Al called. Carl wouldn't kill him. I'm positive of that.
Would you happen to have a photograph of Nicholson?
Why?
Some are on their way by radio photo and some others by airmail. But we might be able to save time if you have some.
I have one. I want to erase something off the back.
Now, don't you fret, Mrs. Chapman. We'll show it to a couple of people. If Carl is innocent like you think he is, this is the quickest way to prove that, too.
Gee, I'd sure like to help you. You know, if I'd seen a snap before.
Sure. Don't say anything you're unsure of.
What did the bar girl say?
Almost the same thing you did. It was crowded and she wasn't sure.
Oh, I'm awful sorry.
That's all right. I'd rather have a careful witness like you than one that thinks he has to say something to live up to the title.
Well, yeah, this guy could have been here and he couldn't have been. That's the best I can do. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Howard. It's okay.
I'll do better next time. I'll keep my eyes open from now on. Maybe I'll get on a force someday, huh, Lieutenant?
You know how it goes. They say a boat is so expensive to keep up that before long you don't own it. It owns you. So we sold it, and there went my fishing trips. You get much back there?
Yeah, but I haven't gotten back into it since before the war.
Yeah, you ought to. Everybody ought to. It's the best
Here's
nerve
the
tonic.
Lieutenant.
Well, oh, thanks. We won't be long.
Take it down when you're through.
Hello, Norma.
Oh,
We've got a picture of a man we want you to look at, Norma.
why?
Well, you look at it. Come on, get a good, bright light on it here.
Who is he?
You ever seen this man?
I couldn't swear, but I think he could be the one that shot Mr. Girk. I hate to say for sure because Mr. Chapman was on that side.
Look at it again, Norma. What is there that you think you recognize?
Maybe I'm wrong, but the way his hair, right here, the way some of it hangs down across his forehead.
This man's about Dollar's height.
Well, I'm not sure of that. He's kind of crouched.
But you think you saw the hair?
I don't even know why I think that, but when I close my eyes, it seems like I can see his face.
Yeah, well, now you take a long look at it. Study it. We'll have some more pictures of this man tomorrow. And if you can be sure, why, then maybe we can let you look at him flesh and blood.
What happened so fast?
Just take your time and forget the lieutenant and me.
If I could, I'd leave it so you could study it all night, but it's a piece of evidence, and therefore belongs to the state, so I can't leave it.
As it turned out, we didn't have to take that photograph or any other picture back to Norma Sales for identification. The first reason turned up that night. There was another message from the Cleveland police. The body of our chief suspect, Carl Nicholson, had been removed from the remains of his car. The crash had occurred within 200 miles of his home. Witnesses said that he had been returning from a friend's country place, and the alcoholic content of his blood gave credence to Mrs. Chapman's story that they had quarreled. It became obvious later that he had been on a week's drunk. In addition to killing him, it had removed him in other respects as a suspect. The other thing that changed the direction of the matter was not as closely connected to any of the principals. As a matter of fact, hardly connected at all. It was a story on the front page of the next morning's paper. A man named Max Gerber, with a criminal background, had been found shot to death. Along with a year-old picture of him was printed the fact that he had been staying at the Quincy Hotel. With Lieutenant Shark, I went to view Max Gerber's remains and his effects, and at 10 that morning, Norma Sale was once more ushered into us.
Well, Norma, we seem to keep you busy, don't we?
Sit down, Norma.
Did you bring some more pictures?
Not the same as we brought last night. That wasn't the man you saw in the alley.
I wasn't sure.
The bartender at the Quincy says he'd never seen you in there before the other night. Why'd you happen to go there?
I don't know. Guess it seemed like a good idea because I hadn't been there.
Was there something special that took you there, Norma? There must be quite a few bars where you haven't been.
There wasn't anything special.
I think it's fair to tell you that we checked the store where you worked and found out that you left there at 3:30 that day.
I didn't feel very good.
You felt good enough to go to the Quincy. You felt good enough to let yourself get picked up by this man.
I guess that's my business, isn't it? What I want to do and who I want to be with?
Why, sure it is, Norma.
Who did you want to be with?
What do you mean?
A man named Alonzo Chapman or a man named Max Gerber?
I just went in, that's all, and I met this guy.
You didn't go into that bar expecting to meet some special man, did you?
No.
Not even if you were paid to meet him?
No, I
don't know what you're talking about.
That man that was killed. I mean, the one you were with. Did you know what he did for a living?
He said he was a salesman.
Well, that's what we're getting at. He was a salesman.
We cut 2 pictures out of the paper, Norma. Here's one. This the man you met at the Quincy?
Yes.
You sure, Norma?
Yes, I am.
This man wasn't killed in the alley the other night.
He's the man I was with.
No, he isn't.
This man was killed last night, Norma, right outside the Quincy Hotel.
Here's the picture of the other man. They look alike, don't they?
They're the same.
I saw the suit Max Gerber was wearing. Even it was sort of the same as Chapman's. It was brown.
But they're the same. I mean, it was Gerber.
It was Gerber you were supposed to meet.
It was Gerber.
No, it wasn't, Norma.
Yes, it was.
All right. You were supposed to pick up Gerber in that bar, weren't you?
I didn't know what they were going to do.
But you did pick this man up and take him down that alley.
They said he owed them some money, and that's all they wanted.
Tell us how you found this man in the bar, Norma.
They pointed him out in the lobby. He made a phone call, and then he went into the bar. I went in after him.
Brown suit, gray hair.
Yes.
It was Alonzo Chapman you took out to get killed.
No, it wasn't.
Why should we tell you it was if it wasn't?
You're lying to me. You're trying to trick me.
No, they just made a mistake.
They pointed him out.
Then you made the mistake.
No, I didn't. I didn't. I did what they said. They told me I had to, and I did. They sent me because I was blonde, and it was the right one. They didn't say they were going to kill him. He just owed them some money. That's all they wanted. That's all I wanted. I didn't want anybody to get killed. I was blonde, and I was young, and that's why they sent me. For money.
Expense account item 2, miscellaneous, while in Los Angeles, $255.08. Item 3, same as item 1, transportation back to Hartford. Expense account total, $672.08. Remarks? The second murder, Max Gerber's, was a gangland rubout, planned with the aid of a young blonde as bait. The first murder was only a mistake. The apparent moral is that companies shouldn't hire salesmen. Women shouldn't marry them. Young blondes should stay away from them, but confidentially, some of my best friends are insurance salesmen. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, stars Edmund O'Brien in the title role and is written by Gil Dowd with music by Eddie Dunstetter. Edmund O'Brien can soon be seen in the Paramount Pictures production, Warpath. Featured in tonight's cast were Hy Everback, John McIntyre, Harry Lang, Jeanette Nolan, and Virginia Gregg. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, is transcribed in Hollywood by Jaime Del Valle. Beginning next Wednesday, yours truly, Johnny Dollar, will be heard 1/2 hour later on most of these same stations. This is Dick Cutting inviting you to join us next week at 9:30 Eastern Daylight Saving Time when Edmund O'Brien returns as yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Every time you buy a United States defense bond, you help in our defense effort and you help build your personal security. Yes, defense bonds are good for you and good for your country. Remember, defense is your job. Buy United States defense bonds. Been to the waxworks lately. It's nothing like being taken to the cleaners, though 45 minutes of cleaner fun would be hard to find. You'll enjoy this evening's session of songs and stuff featuring Robert Q. Lewis, his guests, flatters, chatter, and assorted pleasantries. It's the Robert Q. Lewis Waxworks, open for business 5 evenings a week, Monday through Friday, on most of these same CBS stations. Today, the United States is celebrating the 175th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Stay tuned now for the official U.S. anniversary program with President Harry S. Truman, Secretary of Defense General George C. Marshall, Chief Justice Fred M. Vinson, and others who follow immediately over most of these same CBS stations. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
From Hollywood, it's time now for Edmund O'Brien as...
Johnny Dollar?
That plane crash, Johnny. Did you hear?
Yes, I just turned off my radio.
Oh, it's horrible.
Who is this?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Sam Harris, Columbia.
Oh, sure. Does your company carry the policies on that airline?
Yes, but I'm not thinking of that. That crash was planned.
They're definite about it now.
Yes, an explosion, some kind of a bomb. There were 13 people killed in the plane. They don't know how many in the houses it crashed into. We've got to place responsibility. The company wants to do whatever it can. We've got to find whoever is responsible.
Sure, Mr. Harris. You want me to go out?
Yes, we do. Their airline representative is a man named Reed. Go out and do everything you can.
Edmund O'Brien in a transcribed adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Home Office, Columbia All Risk Insurance Company. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Fairway matter. Expense account item 1, $250, cab fare to the scene of the plane crash, which, as you know, covered quite a bit of territory. The Fairway Airlines plane had taken off at 8:20 p.m., had reached an altitude of no more than 1,000 feet, and then had crashed, setting afire 2 houses a short distance from the Springfield-Hartford Airport. I got there a little after 9:30. One house had been partially saved, but the other had been completely demolished. A family of 4 living in it had been killed. The parents of one child in the first house weren't expected to live. And beyond, twisted pieces of the plane were scattered across a field. Fragments still smoking and turned white by the foam from chemical extinguishers.
Oh, there's nothing to do here, Mr. Stone. What's going on? If you're home, we'll notify you.
Mr. Reed?
I've got to know about
Mr. Carl Reed? Mr. Carl Reed?
Yes, over here. What is it?
Please, Mrs. Goodhill, please go and wait in your car. We'll let you know as soon as we can.
My baby. My baby.
Yes? What do you want? My name is Dollar. The insurance company sent me.
Insurance company? Good Lord, this is hardly the time to worry about money, is it?
I'm a private investigator. They've hired me to help in any way I can to fix the plane.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I guess I... Oh, you have to excuse me, Mrs. Goodhue. There are some things I have to do. Come along, Mr. Dollar. She doesn't know about the explosion. And she thinks there's a chance her daughter wasn't on the plane. She was. She was the stewardess.
You haven't told her?
I can let her hope for a couple of more hours. Why shouldn't I? I've had to tell too many people. It's just horrible. I think even worse than if it had been an accident. When you know it was premeditated, when you know someone planned it. What kind of person would you have to be to plan something like this?
It's hard to believe, Mr. Reed.
But we have proof. There was an explosion in the extreme after section. It destroyed all the control cables to the tail assembly.
I don't suppose the civil aeronautics man is here yet.
No, he's on his way. They're sending one of their best, S.W. Nugent. Captain Lenhardt of the state police is here, though.
Oh? I'd like to speak to him, then. You have any idea where he is?
The last time I saw him, he was over by that ambulance. Oh, it's left. But, see the group of men over by the hangar?
Yeah?
Well, they collected the bodies there. Made as many identifications as possible.
I know it's bad, Mr. Reed, but don't you go to pieces now. That wouldn't help at all.
I'll be all right. I'll see you later.
Yeah. I remembered Captain Jim Lenhardt from a case we shared last year, and I found him in the group of silent men. The silence and the expressions told better than words how they felt about the row of sheet-draped bodies on the ground.
How was Reed making out? I thought he was going to pieces a little while ago.
He's still in pretty bad shape.
Well, he's not alone. But for us, anyway, Dollar, it could have been worse. Plane could have been filled.
Yeah, that crossed my mind. And you and I are thinking together, Captain, that our approach will be to find out if we can which victim was the planned victim.
Well, with what we have now, I don't see any other way to start, do you?
No. The possibilities, as I see them, are murder with a motive, suicide disguised, or a homicidal maniac.
That must cover it. I have men covering the airport and a 2-mile circle around it. Their orders are to question everybody they spot and search every car. That's about all we can do tonight.
Well, I'll see you in the morning, then, if it's all right with you.
It sure is. I'm glad to have you on the case. I'll meet you in my office at 9.
Good.
Oh, there's another ambulance. And get the rest of these poor devils into the morgue. Try to find out who they are.
The next morning, the official findings were released. The explosive had been nitroglycerin. It had been detonated by some electrical means, which it was assumed was connected to a timing device that had not yet been found. Captain Lenhart's men had questioned a number of suspicious characters near the airport without result. But he himself had received an anonymous tip on a possible suspect, a Wilbur Wheeler, who was a member of the ground crew that had serviced the plane just before its takeoff. Wheeler was shown to the captain's office about 40 minutes after I'd gotten there.
Why'd you pick me to come up here? Why didn't you get Straker or Mills? They're over me.
It's just routine, Wheeler.
Routine, but you must have a reason. I got a right to know if you got a reason, haven't I?
Why do you think we started with you?
Well, I'm asking you, aren't I?
Don't be evasive, Wheeler. Can't you say you don't know?
The stewardess who died in that crash, Shirley Goodhue.
I know. I know it.
We understand that she meant something to you.
Weren't you in love with her?
Yes.
We understand that you made quite a pest of yourself phoning her at home, waiting for her at the airport.
And then a week or so ago, you learned she was going to marry the co-pilot who was killed. What's his name?
Bill Strand, wasn't it, Wheeler?
Yeah. You're saying that you think I caused that crash, aren't you?
You wanted to know why you were here?
I told you it was just routine, Wheeler. And it would have been if you'd acted differently. But it sounded as though you were trying to hide some facts from us.
Well, I won't anymore. I don't have any reason to.
And why did you?
I don't know. I've been going crazy since I heard about it last night. I was still at the field, and I got sick, and I had to go home.
Yeah, we heard about that.
I got home, and I turned on my radio. Then I heard what caused the crash, that explosion. I knew that a lot of things I've said and a lot of things I'd done were going to make trouble for me. Even getting sick and coming home was bad.
What were some of the other things?
I said some pretty bad things to Shirley when I heard she was going to marry Strand. Then I had a fight with him.
You had a fight with him over the same thing?
Well, I guess for me it was really over that. He ordered me around one day, and I didn't like it, and that's how it started. He beat me up pretty bad and said he'd have my job. And I told him that I'd see the day his plane with him in it would be plastered against some hill. I know what it sounds like now, but it didn't mean anything. It was just talk.
There's plenty of that, all right.
You heard enough, Dollar?
Yeah, I think so.
That's all then, Wheeler.
I can go?
Yeah. Nobody would be stupid enough to compromise himself the way you did, then pull a job like this.
All right. I sure made a lot of mistakes. I know that.
Yeah. Just be around or we can find you if we want to talk to you anymore.
I can't go back to that airport, sir. I was going to call him and quit if it's all right with you.
Just be where we can find you, that's all.
I will. I'm sorry.
A lot of people are, Wheeler.
I know. Well...
Goodbye, Wheeler. Thanks for coming down.
Yes, sir.
What do you think?
The only reason I say forget him is because he's the first one we've questioned, and things don't work out that way.
Yeah. Collins, the man just leaving my office. Name is Wheeler, Wilbur Wheeler. Have 2 of the boys get on him and stay. I'll arrange to relieve him tonight. Yeah, thanks.
I'd like to know what's in his background. I'd like to get a psychiatrist's reaction, wouldn't you?
We'll learn about him. Now, let's get on this list of passengers and see what we can get from their survivors.
We spent the rest of the day on the efforts of 6 more of Captain Lenhart's men preparing files on the 10 dead passengers. One file contained nothing but a name, Rupert Stone, gotten from the ticket office records as that of a man who had paid cash for space to Augusta, Maine. The Hartford address he had given was non-existent, and the phone number rang a bakery where no one had ever heard of a Rupert Stone. That one we dropped until the accurate identification of the bodies was complete. Lenhart and I started out to follow up a couple of the others that evening.
This is rotten work.
Check.
Mrs. Graham?
Yes?
This is Mr. Dollar. I'm Captain Lenhart of the State Police. We'd like to talk to you about the death of your husband.
No. I've talked too much. It only keeps in my mind the things I saw in that field.
And the women crying.
We know, Mrs. Graham, but it's our job to fix the responsibility. We only want to ask you a few questions.
You'd want to help find whoever caused all those deaths if you could, wouldn't you?
How can I help?
May we come in?
All right. But only a little while. I haven't slept.
Thank you.
Oh, no, Skipper. Be quiet. He knows. Poor old dog. Very soon he will die. And then I'll be alone. Oh, please sit down.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Graham.
Yes, thank you. Mrs. Graham, your husband...
Yes?
Well, he bought space to Boston, didn't he?
Yes. His brother's buried there.
Oh.
He was a religious man. Quite often he would go to visit his brother's grave.
I see.
I think that's all we needed, wasn't it, Dollar, to recheck his plan?
Yeah. Yes, I think that was all.
Yeah, I think we'd better go. We're sorry to have bothered you, Mrs. Graham.
And thank you very much for seeing us.
All right.
Yes, thanks very much. Don't bother to get up. You don't have to come to the door with us. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Mrs. Graham.
Quiet, Skipper. He won't come back.
I couldn't cut it. I think that dog did it. Sorry.
Don't apologize to me.
This hasn't happened to me since I was a rookie.
Forget it.
But grilling a poor old woman to find out if her husband's cancer might have driven him to suicide, I couldn't go through it.
A whole rotten mess. I think it's getting us so old. Why don't we have a couple of drinks on the way downtown? Forget it for tonight, huh? Or try to?
That suits me. You know Al's on Front Street?
Yeah, it's fine. Any place.
Well, let's go then. I'll phone in from there and have Collins check me off duty.
Your friend didn't leave.
No, he had a phone. I'll catch it.
It's $1.60, sir.
That's good enough. Keep it.
Thank you. Oh, here he comes.
Well, drink up, Dollar. I guess I'll have to waste mine, because it seems I'm not off duty.
What happened?
Well, we're back to that stewardess again. The explosive has been checked to her equipment. The lab men say some twisted metal they found used to be a first aid box. They think it was in there.
That brings Wilbur Wheeler back again, too, huh?
He's been picked up right now.
I don't think I need this drink to get through a session with him.
We will return you to the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar, in just a moment. Lee Tracy plays his rollicking screen role of Hilda Johnson, newspaperman, in Hector MacArthur's perennial comedy, The Front Page, tomorrow night on CBS Broadway Playhouse. It's an all-fun cast headed by Lee Tracy as Chicago's Hector MacArthur farce about crime reporters comes to life once again on Broadway Playhouse tomorrow night over most of these same CBS stations. Now, with our star, Edmund O'Brien, we return you to the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Not necessarily, Wheeler, not necessarily.
Well, I heard you do.
Did you locate Carl Reed, Dollar?
Yeah, he was at home. Poor guy's been under doctor's care, but I think I got what we need. How have you two been getting along?
Yeah, Wheeler just got here. We were covering the point of whether or not I have a right to have him brought down here.
Maybe I'm wrong.
You are.
Didn't you want to come, Wilbur?
I guess I don't like the idea of being loaded into a police car twice in one day with everybody in the block gawking at me.
A lot of people have been loaded into police cars today, Wheeler. They were glad to come in and do anything they could to help clear this thing up.
Well, I want to help, too. I didn't mean it that way.
We're glad to hear that. How long have you worked for the Fairway Airline?
About a year and a half, I guess.
What'd you do before that?
What do you mean? You still think I had something to do with that crash? That's what you mean, isn't it?
We'd like to find out who did.
Wouldn't you?
But you think I did it, and I didn't. I told you I didn't. Even you said I didn't.
And it sounds like you've got nothing to worry about, so calm down and answer our questions.
I want to know why you're asking questions like that. Why did you bring me back here?
Because some new evidence has turned up. That's why.
What does that have to do with me?
It has to do with Shirley Goodhue.
I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you're talking about. I told you everything there was about her and me.
Did you know that she carried a first aid kit aboard the plane last night?
First aid kit? I don't know what you mean.
You don't?
After working there a year and a half?
What did you do on the plane?
I brought food on, checked the water, and a few other things.
Things that the stewardess would be involved in. She'd be there with you, wouldn't she?
Yeah, but I don't know what you're driving at. I don't know what you mean.
In the back part of the plane?
Yes.
Shirley was there, and you were there last night.
Yeah, but I wish...
Where did she put her first aid kit, Wheeler?
Why do you ask me that? I don't remember. I didn't notice. They had a place they kept it, but I didn't notice.
Was it open?
I don't know.
What was in it?
If I knew what you meant, I don't know why you're asking me these things.
I talked to Mr. Reed, so I know about these things. Fairway is an unscheduled airline, so they have their own particular routines. One of them is that this first aid kit is the stewardess's responsibility. Each one is a kit. They take it off the plane when they leave, and they bring it aboard when they report for work.
I don't know what you're talking about.
The explosive, Wheeler. The nitroglycerin that was hidden in that first aid kit.
I didn't put it there. That's what you mean, but I didn't do it. I didn't know anything about it.
Enough explosive to tear out the whole tail assembly.
I didn't do it. I didn't.
13 people in that plane, Wheeler. 4 people in one of the houses it crashed into. Probably 2 more in the other.
I didn't do it. I didn't do it.
Wilbur Wheeler was turned over to the police psychiatrist because we couldn't get any farther with him. And a lie detector test was arranged for the following morning. The web that was tightening around him was only circumstantial. And the question was, did he know that he could keep on saying he hadn't done it and that we couldn't do anything without physical proof? Or was he innocent? Our last move that night was to go to Wheeler's room. We were looking for wire that could be checked to that used with the explosive. We couldn't find that or anything else that could be a definite help. But a couple of things we didn't find seemed strange.
Hey, he said he came home and turned on his radio. Well, there isn't a radio here.
Maybe we've got him on a real lie there. Newspapers, Leonhardt. Can you find any?
Well, I hadn't noticed. No, there aren't any. Unless he's got them out of sight someplace.
Why would he do that? Huh? Not in the wastepaper basket. You'd think a man as closely connected to this as he was would want to find out what the papers were saying, wouldn't you? Guilty or innocent.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know, Dollar. I'm ambushed. Let's drop it for tonight, huh?
I'm ready.
We'll try him again tomorrow. I'll drop you at home and see you about 9 in the morning.
The next morning, Lenhardt and I talked to the psychiatrist who'd spent a couple of hours with Wheeler. In technical terms, what he said was that Wheeler was definitely suffering from a severe guilt complex. But whether that meant he had actually committed the crime or had only wished secretly that harm would come to Miss Goodhue wasn't clear yet. In terms of evidence, that meant nothing. The lack of a radio or newspapers in his room, the doctor tossed off as meaning merely that Wheeler was hiding from actuality. As Captain Lenhardt put it,
if that doctor thinks he helped my mental condition, he's wrong.
That afternoon, there were 2 developments. The first one was the report that the results of Wilbur Wheeler's lie detector test were negative, but his reactions put the mark of guilt all over him. The second came from the Fairway office of Carl Reed. He'd been unable to locate another of his stewardesses, and when finally he'd sent someone to her apartment, she'd been found, shot to death. We met Mr. Reed at the scene of the second crime.
I simply had to get back on the job today. 2 of our flights were delayed yesterday because of my going to pieces.
You better watch it now, Mr. Reed.
I don't know if
Just take it easy. You try to phone this girl and tell her to report for one of your flights. And when you sent somebody out here, she was found dead, right?
Yes. I hadn't tried to contact Alice before because I knew that she and Miss Goodhue had been close friends, and I knew she must have felt almost responsible for her death.
Why, Mr. Reed?
Why? She was scheduled for the flight the other night. I thought you knew that.
No, we didn't.
I wish we had.
But I told you that night at the scene of the crash, I was talking to her mother, Mrs. Goodhue.
Yes, I remember that. You said she thought there was a chance that her daughter wasn't on the plane.
I told you the other girl was scheduled to
No,
go...
Mr. Reed, no. You made it sound like Mrs. Goodhue thought her daughter was on a different flight. You didn't say anything about another stewardess.
Oh, good Lord.
It's all right. It's all right, Mr. Reed. The human mind isn't infallible. But it can correct its mistakes. Well, go on. Tell us now.
That's all. With everything else, I suppose it didn't seem important. I know our procedure is less exact than the larger companies. The girls often traded flights.
When did you find out about this trade?
Not until Mrs. Goodhue told me that her daughter had gone to work that night.
You didn't discuss it with her by any chance?
No, I didn't discuss it that night,
Well, I think we'd better go see Mrs. Goodhue, Dollar.
I think so.
Sergeant Collins over there will be in charge here, Mr. Reed. He may want to ask you a few more questions.
Oh, all right.
Collins.
Yes, sir?
I'm leaving. I'll see you at headquarters.
Right.
You know what this probably means?
The case against Wheeler is shot.
Second stewardess, that's a pattern. Everything we've tried to do has been for nothing.
Circumstantial evidence sometimes does that. But we were close. We settled on a stewardess anyway, as the intended victim.
Yeah, but it doesn't help to think that maybe all those people died because of a mistake. The wrong stewardess died in the crash, and the killer had to come back to take care of the right one.
Of course, I'll tell you anything I can.
Well, we've just learned that your daughter wasn't scheduled to be on that plane, Mrs. Goodhue.
No, she wasn't.
Do you know why she happened to be?
We understand that she and Alice Turner exchange flights quite often, but do you know how it happened the other night?
Well, no. Shirley was here at home, and the phone rang.
What time was that, please?
Oh, I hardly remember. We'd had an early dinner.
The plane took off at 8:25. How long before then?
Well, an hour at least. No, it was less than that because Shirley left in such a hurry.
What did she say?
Well, she said that one of the girls was sick and she was going to take her place on a flight. Just up to Maine and back, she said. She said she'd be home soon after midnight. I've never liked rushed decisions, and I've always worried when Shirley left in a hurry like that.
She did it quite often?
Yes. Yes, they all did it. 6 of them live here in Hartford. I never liked it.
Did she trade more often with Alice Turner than the others, do you know?
Well, I don't think so. No, it was an agreement, almost a code. If one of them couldn't work, one of the others would fill in.
Well, then it's possible that Alice Turner called some of the others before she called your daughter.
Yes, it is possible. And I wish that I...
Naturally, the hope that Captain Lenhart and I had was that we'd find another of the stewardesses Alice Turner had talked to and learn the reason she had wanted to get out of the fatal flight. We didn't. She hadn't called any of the others, and we were left with nothing. Nothing but the prospect of starting the whole investigation over from the beginning. The enormity of the crime had been in all of our minds from the first night. We'd never thought it might have a positive quality, but it did. The horror of it led to the solving of it late that afternoon. Lenhart and I had found no place from which to start over. I went back to my apartment building, and in the corridor just outside my door...
Is your name Dollar?
Huh? Yeah. Can I help you?
I want to talk to you. I think we better go inside, huh?
Oh, I'm pretty busy.
I know you are. I want to talk about the plane explosion.
Oh? All right, come on in.
Now, look, I can't stand it anymore. I read about Alice Turner this afternoon, and I can't stand it, that's all.
What do you know about it?
Just that, all those people killed for nothing. And I'm partly to blame, too. I'm ready to give myself up.
Why'd you come to me, then? Why didn't you go to the police?
Well, you can talk to somebody like you. The police are always building the case for the state.
Okay. They'll get you anyway.
But you'll know what I really said.
Go ahead.
His name is Church. Arthur Church.
Who is Arthur Church?
He's the chief pusher for a bigger narcotics outfit than you ever thought there was.
We've had a few cranks in this case already.
No crank. Alice Turner was carrying the stuff for him. She wanted to get out, and Church wouldn't let her.
So she's got smart. She set up a meeting with a federal man the other night. That's why she was killed. All the rest.
Doesn't make sense. If she'd made this date, don't you think the Federals would have been in on this?
Alice didn't tell him who she was or what she did.
How do you know all this?
I'm the one that told her church was on to her. I told her to drop it, not to go. That's my part of it. I told her church was on to her, and that he'd stop her some way. I told her to drop it no matter what.
I don't like it. Why would she put Shirley Goodhue on the spot?
Well, Alice didn't know what would happen. I didn't know. Who could know he'd do anything like that?
Why did he? If what you say is true, he could have stopped her some other way.
That's my doing, too. I kept her out of sight. And the other night, I told her to do anything to stay where she was and not to go to the field. She believed me then. I called Shirley Goodhue and told her she was sick. And that's why she didn't go.
Do you know where the explosive was that wrecked the plane?
I read today. The first aid kit. That's where Alice carried the stuff.
And it was her kid. How did the Goodhue girl get it?
Because she was called at the last minute, and Alice had her things in the locker at the field. Oh, now look, Mr. Dollar, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't telling the truth. It's a peddling rap for me. But I've been reading these stories about the people that got killed and the families that are left. I couldn't take it. I knew the truth. And then when Alice was killed, there was no reason for not telling what I knew.
Are you ready to go to the police with him?
You heard what I got to say. I'm giving myself up. You're a witness to that.
Do you know where this Arthur Church is?
Yeah, he and I, we live together.
And you'll come with us.
If I have to, sure. Sure, I'll take it to him.
This it, Moran?
This is where I left him.
You go in then and tell him who's here.
All right.
Just call him naturally now.
All right. Are you here?
I'm here, you dirty. Wait out! Get out of the way. I got it.
Expense account item 2, miscellaneous, $23.45. Expense account total, $25.95. Remarks? With the cost of the other people, the total hardly seems important, does it? I think it would be easier to forget the $25 than the rest of the matter, so let's do it. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, stars Edmund O'Brien in the title role and is written by Gil Dowd with music by Eddie Dunstetter. Edmund O'Brien can soon be seen in the Paramount Pictures production Warpath. Featured in tonight's cast were Peter Leeds, Ray Hartman, Martha Wentworth, Bill Boucher, Victor Perrin, and Virginia Gregg. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, is transcribed in Hollywood by Jaime Del Valle. This is Dan Coverly inviting you to join us next week at the same time when Edmund O'Brien returns as...
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Every time you buy a United States defense bond, you help in our defense effort, and you help build your personal security. Yes, defense bonds are good for you and good for your country. Remember, defense is your job. Buy United States defense bonds. Many people find their way to the police lineup. The innocent, the vagrant, the thief. A surprising number of action-packed police cases begin when interested parties survey the lineup. And that's where our thrilling lineup story begins tomorrow night over most of these same CBS stations. Listen for these authentic dramas about real police methods on CBS. This is CBS, where you'll never lose when you follow the news on the Columbia Broadcasting System.
WBBM FM, Chicago.
The refreshing, delicious treat that gives you chewing enjoyment presents for your listening enjoyment Edmund O'Brien as
Johnny Dollar.
This is Hamill. Did you call me?
If you're Guy Hamill, the local coroner, I did.
That's who I am. What do you want?
I wondered when I could get together with you and talk over the Breer death.
Breer? Which one was that?
Neal Breer. He died last week.
Oh, why? What do you want to talk about him for? Funeral's all over. Folks have all gone home.
I'm an investigator from his insurance company. They aren't convinced that he died a natural death.
Huh? What do they think they know about it?
They received a letter from someone here in town who said they weren't quite sure.
What was that? Who was it?
I'm sorry I can't tell you that right now, but I'd like to go over the case with you.
Case is closed as far as I'm concerned. I'm busy with other work.
All right, Mr. Hamill. I'll have to start from someplace else.
the makers of Wrigley's Spearmint Chewing Gum bring you Edmund O'Brien in a transcribed adventure of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
For refreshment while you work, for enjoyment anytime, chew a stick of Wrigley's Spearmint Gum. The delicious, long-lasting, real mint flavor of Wrigley's Spearmint cools your mouth and freshens your taste. The good, smooth chewing helps keep you feeling fresh and alert, adds enjoyment to whatever you're doing. So, indoors, outdoors, at work or at play, enjoy chewing Wrigley's Spearmint Gum. Wrigley's Spearmint. Refreshing, delicious.
Expense account submitted by Special Investigator Johnny Dollar to Home Office, Great Eastern Insurance Company, Hartford, Connecticut. The following is an accounting of expenditures during my investigation of the Neal Breer Matter. Expense account item 1, $235, airfare and incidentals between Hartford and my destination. In compliance with the company's request, I will not make that city and its state a matter of this record, and I will leave it up to the company to strike the true names of the people involved. My first personal contact was the man whose letter had set off the investigation, Dr. Henry Richards. We met in his office secretly that evening after his nurse had gone home.
I'm sorry to admit, Mr. Dollar, that there have been moments when I regretted writing that letter. I have a wife and a son and a practice to think about. This is a small town, and I could be banished for stirring up a lot of unnecessary trouble.
Both the company and I understand, Dr. Richards, and we want you to know that your letter and everything you tell me will be kept in strict confidence if Neal Breer's death was due to natural causes. If it wasn't, of course, the letter and my report will do you no harm.
Yes, I see.
You've nothing to worry about. I'll be the villain. As a matter of fact, I think I am one already. I talked to your coroner.
Hamill? You told him why you were here?
Yes. The only way for me to handle this is to stay out in the open with him and everyone else. If I make a fool of myself, I'll take a late train out of town.
You told him you received a letter?
Yes, but not from whom?
You're sure he doesn't suspect me?
He didn't sound like he did. There's no reason for him to, is there? You issued the death certificate, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Tell me about Breer. How old was he?
He was 26. He was taken seriously ill at work.
Where did he work?
He was part owner of a service station. I was called there that morning. He was in a coma when I arrived, but Bircher described his convulsions to me.
Bircher was his business partner?
Yes, Wesley Bircher. He described the convulsions quite clearly. It sounded as though they were the result of a violent heart attack. I want you to understand, Mr. Dollar, a heart condition could have caused the symptoms he described and his condition when I got there. I called for an ambulance, but he was dead before it arrived.
Do you know his medical history, Dr. Richards?
Yes, I do. He's been coming to me for a number of years. I was the attendant physician at the high school during his junior and senior years. He was a classmate of my son, Alan, and he and a number of the others continued to come to me, Bircher for one.
Did Breer have trouble with his heart?
Yes, there had been a condition, but it wasn't serious at his age. I told him that he'd have to be careful when he reached a certain age, but I was stunned at his death. I hesitated as long as I could before I signed the death certificate, but as I told you, if I'd refused to sign it, I don't think it's fair to ask a private physician to take that responsibility.
I don't either, but it seems to be the way we run things. What else might have caused his death, Doctor? Obviously a poison.
Yes. Bismine.
That's a metallic poison, isn't it?
Yes.
How fast does it work?
20 to 40 grains would be a fatal dose in from 10 to 30 minutes.
And the symptoms could have been those described by this Bircher.
Yes, convulsion, coma, and death.
Breer is buried here in town?
Yes. What are you going to do?
I'm going to arrange for an autopsy.
I don't know how you'll do that.
Well, I'm going to ask you to play one more part in this, and then I won't involve you anymore. You haven't told anyone about the letter you wrote us.
No, not even my family.
All right. I'll come tomorrow morning when your nurse will be a witness. I'll demand that you show me Breer's medical history, and I'll go to the coroner and ask for an autopsy.
I know I started it, but I don't like it now.
Believe me, Doctor, you have nothing to worry about. And you wouldn't have started it if you didn't want to see the right thing done, true?
Yes. I'll see you in the morning.
I made my appearance at the doctor's office the next morning, was unpleasantly efficient with his nurse, went through Breer's medical history, and proceeded to the coroner's office. The fact that he held that public office had nothing to do with Mr. Guy Hamill's personality. He was close to 50, and it had taken years to develop it. If he'd been a banker or anything else, I'm sure he would have been the same. I caught him as he came out of his office.
I told you yesterday I was busy with other business.
I know, but I hoped you might spare just a minute or two.
Why didn't you call for an appointment?
That's what I was doing yesterday when you told me you were too busy.
Well, I am. Why don't you come back tomorrow sometime?
It would be faster to go to the state police, Mr. Hamill.
Well, why don't you do that then?
I want to play fair with you. I don't want to go over your head unless I have to. I'll keep you from your lunch only a minute or two.
Well, all right. Come on. You've got a lot of nerve, you know, saying these things to me.
Maybe you're right. But I'm being paid to say them and a lot more. Right now, I'm going to ask you to have Breer's body exhumed, have an autopsy performed.
So, you're an investigator from an insurance company in Hartford. Well, I think it's time you brushed up on municipal law. As a coroner, I'm required by law to hold an inquest and order autopsy when there is reasonable grounds to suspect that the deceased suffered a violent or unnatural death or died suddenly from some unknown cause.
Yeah, that's a perfect quote.
Neal Breer died as a result of a heart attack, and a competent doctor issued a signed death certificate to that effect. Do you have reasonable grounds?
Yes, the letter I told you about.
Reasonable.
In effect, it said that Breer was young and healthy and that there was a reasonable question about his dying of heart attack.
Did this person presume to know as much about Breer as his doctor?
As much, maybe. How familiar are you with poisons? Have you been trained to diagnose their symptoms and so on?
No, I haven't. I rely on the attendant doctors to inform me.
I'm not blaming you for that, but has it ever occurred to you that every practicing physician is not an expert toxicologist? The study of poisons is almost a science in itself.
It's not my job to check up on the doctors that sign death certificates. And what's this about poison?
There is a poison that, while it's killing, gives the same symptoms as a heart attack. I'm adding that to the letter the insurance company received. To me, that adds up to reasonable grounds for suspicion.
You know, I think your heart is in the right place. I don't go for this poppycock, but I can see how you'd get upset.
It's not me. It's the insurance company that doesn't like even the possibility that murder or suicide can be committed and charged off to death by natural causes, simply because a doctor signs a death certificate. Now, do I get my autopsy?
The case is closed, no matter what you say or think. It's the law.
Do you think Breer survivors will feel the same way as father and widow?
I don't know. You can go ahead. If his survivors demand an autopsy, and I don't think they're fools enough to, then I'll accept that as reasonable suspicion, and I'll order an autopsy.
That's good enough.
And if you talk them into it, you're going to be held responsible as far as I'm concerned. Now, I'd like to eat my lunch, if you don't mind.
I spent the rest of the day in the Hall of Records and in poring over old newspapers and the high school yearbook of Neal Breer's graduation. By that evening, I had a fair picture of the boy's background. He'd been a hard-working student, a good athlete. He'd eloped with a classmate, Paula Wilson, less than a month after they'd left school, and since then he had lived a completely average small-town life. There would be no reason for suspicion, except for the doctor's letter and his statement to me. So I kept that foremost in my mind, and after a 6:30 dinner, went to pay a call on Breer's widow, an attractive girl who turned an ashen gray when I told her why I'd come.
Why would anyone say such a thing?
I don't know, Mrs. Breer, unless they had reason to believe it.
Believe what? I don't understand. Why should anyone think Neal died from poison?
I went to see Dr. Richards this morning. I demanded that he show me your husband's medical record. There was a heart condition, but it shouldn't have been fatal. Not at his age.
Nobody told me. Please leave me alone.
I can't, Mrs. Breer. Not after coming this far and learning what I've learned. I can't stop until an autopsy is performed and I've learned the truth, whichever way it goes.
No.
It would be much easier for all of us, I think, if you'd help me.
No, I won't. I can't stand it. You can't ask me to go through it all again.
I'd hoped you'd want to know the truth yourself.
I know the truth. Neal is dead. And there's nothing I can do about it. Nothing. Now leave me alone. Please go away. Leave me alone.
Neal Breer's father ran a small grocery store with living quarters above. At first meeting, I hoped for more cooperation from him. He evidently had a calmer acceptance of death.
You should have come to me first. I could have told you about Paula. Grief ain't honest after a person's dead. When a person's alive and suffering, then it's honest. But after a person's dead, you ain't really feeling grief for them, you're feeling it for yourself.
I suppose you've got a point, Mr. Breer.
I made up my mind to that after Neal's mother died. Yeah, some people think it's cruel, I suppose. But at a time like that, the big problem ain't dying, it's living on.
Mr. Breer, after what I've told you, will you request an autopsy?
No, I won't.
Well, don't you want to be sure why your son died?
I'm satisfied. He had heart trouble. We all knew it.
I described a possible poison to you.
There'd be no way for Neal to get it. Oh, I know about insurance, too. I don't like what's behind what you're saying, and I'm not going to take no part in bringing up things that are finished.
What do you think is behind what I'm saying?
I know about Neal's new insurance policy, and I know about suicide clauses. You think my son took his own life, and I tell you he didn't.
You're wrong, Mr. Breer. It would be stupid to infer anything like that, not knowing the cause of death. And that's all I want to know. What made your son die?
I told you I'm satisfied how he died. He's beyond this world now, and I won't have him brought back.
Good evening, sir.
Hello. Key to room 312, please.
Yes, sir. Oh, Mr. Dollar, you've had a couple of calls. The last one just a minute ago.
Oh, thanks. No name left?
No, sir.
Well, who took the calls, please?
I did. We don't have a regular phone operator.
Oh, this gentleman, what did he say?
Why, he asked for you. No, the first time he asked if you were registered here and had me ring your room. Then he called back a minute ago. He seemed awfully upset.
Did you ask his name?
Yes, but he said, never mind, I'll call back.
Could you tell anything about the voice, like whether it was an old man or a young man?
Well, I'd say it was young. Yes, young and almost hysterical.
Yeah. Here's my card and ID.
Yes, sir.
When this man calls again, I want you to listen to the conversation.
I'll get into trouble.
No, you won't. Maybe over a legal matter, I'd like to have a witness. I can't pay for your help because paid witnesses is no good. Will you help me?
If you're sure it's all right.
It is. That's a promise. Thanks. I'll go right up to my room.
More music in just a moment. But now I'd like to say this to the young women between the ages 18 to 34. If you've been wondering how you can help out in America's fight for freedom and liberty, investigate the many important jobs now open in the Women's Army Corps. It is again an important part of our team for defense. Get complete information at your local Army recruiting station. And now back to the music. Here's a request from a certain party over on Oak Street who signed her note, Restless. She wants to dedicate this.
Johnny Dollar.
You don't know who this is, Mr. Dollar, but you've got to listen to me. You've got to stop what you're doing and leave town.
Why?
Because there's no reason for you to be here. You're hurting people. You're trying to cause a lot of trouble that there's no reason for. You've got to stop.
Who are you?
It doesn't make any difference. You've got to stop, that's all. There's no reason for you to be here.
The fact that you call like this and won't give me your name makes me wonder if there isn't more reason than I thought.
You've got to stop. I don't want you to hurt these people. I'm warning you.
Warning me?
Yes, I'm warning you. If you don't stop, you're going to be hurt.
Hello? Hello?
He broke the connection, sir.
That was the same man?
Oh, yes, sir, it was.
And you heard him warn me?
I heard him all right.
Good. Now, will you get me the home phone number of Coroner Guy Hamill?
For refreshment while you work, for enjoyment anytime, chew a stick of Wrigley's Spearmint Gum. When your mouth feels dry, when you're warm or tired, Wrigley's Spearmint is really refreshing. The lively, full-bodied real mint flavor cools your mouth, moistens your throat, freshens your taste. And the chewing itself gives you a little lift, helps you feel your best and do your best. So for chewing enjoyment plus pleasant refreshment, chew delicious Wrigley's Spearmint Gum. And now with our star, Edmund O'Brien, we bring you the second act of yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Yes?
Dollar, Mr. Hamill.
Oh, yes. Come on in. Well, I suppose you feel perky this morning.
Better than I felt yesterday afternoon, I can tell you that.
And I suppose you've got it right. The toxicologist's on his way from the state capitol. The body will be ready for him and his helpers when they get here. I hope you understand that I couldn't do anything but what I did.
Sure I do.
All I have to go by is the death certificate. But something like that phone call to you comes up, and then I can move.
I suppose you never thought of it, but your position and that of a big share of the coroners in the country is pretty much the same as the position of the insurance companies.
Hmm?
Well, all they've got to go on is the certificate, too. Doctor signs one, the company meets the claim. Nobody will ever know how many poisonings have been chalked off to natural causes. Not because the doctor isn't sincere as a rule, but because he hasn't had the training to rate the responsibility of making the decision.
Well, it's 9:30. Those men from the Capitol should be here in an hour or less. I guess I'd better see that things are ready for them. You want to be on hand?
No, thanks, Coroner. I'll leave my name and number with the clerk if you'll have them phone me when they're through, huh? I boned up on it enough to know that a metallic poison such as bismine would leave traces in spite of embalming, where other types would be impossible to detect. I also knew approximately the tests and analyses they would have to make, and I didn't think it would take experts very long. It didn't. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, the results were phoned me.
Hello, Dr. Richard speaking.
This is Johnny Dollar, Doctor.
Oh, yes. What is it?
Well, you should feel proud of yourself, sir. Neal Breer's death was caused by bismine.
What's that? An analysis was made? I didn't know anything about it.
It was kept under cover. A man from the state capitol came over. They just finished.
Well, then my instinct to write the letter was sound.
Certainly was, and I hope you get the credit you deserve.
No. But at least you and I can meet in public. How about dinner tonight?
I'd like to, but I can't promise. Actually, this case has just started for me.
Of course, I should have thought of that.
And I'm right back to you for help again.
Yes, certainly.
About the availability of bismine. Where could Breer have gotten a hold of some?
Very small amounts of it are used in the treatment of certain blood disorders. It's not a common drug by any means. I really don't know where a layman would get it.
Okay. Well, all right. Thanks, Doctor.
Of course. Good luck, and call me if there's anything I can do.
The inquest was not to be held until the following morning, but I asked for and got permission to start my investigation before the formal pronouncement of the jury. We all knew what it would be. Death self-inflicted, or by the hand of person or persons unknown.
The best quality I can find. Yes, Mrs. Kelly. Sam's late to work today, but when he gets here, I'll send it right over. Yes, thank you.
Hello, Mr. Breer.
Well, Mr. Dollar, you did it, didn't you?
I'm sorry, but at this point, I'm hardly the one to blame, am I?
I blame you for tearing up our lives again. It was better before, no matter what. Sometimes ignorance is more merciful than knowing things.
I'm afraid I can't agree with that.
Well, don't make no difference. We know, and we'll have to take the things that come with it.
You mentioned suicide yesterday, Mr. Breer. Did you have any reason, other than being angry with insurance companies and me?
Not no definite one. Nothing he told me.
What reason, then?
Neal and me weren't very close. Hadn't been for quite a time. I didn't like his marrying that girl the way he did, and he knew it.
What do you mean, the way he did?
Running off. Her barely the age of consent, and him not much older. I told them they was ashamed to tell their parents because they knew it wasn't decent.
Haven't they been happy?
I'm not sure either way. Neal didn't come home much, and he wouldn't tell me anyhow. But his business partner, young Wes Bircher, come to talk to me. Asked me what was ailing Neal. Said something was. He was down in the mouth all the time.
And on the strength of that, you mentioned suicide to me, huh?
Well, when I learned you was an insurance man after something, and then you talked about poison, well, that's when I figured you thought it was suicide on account of that new policy he took out.
Oh, that isn't very much, is it? All right, Mr. Breer. I'll go down and talk to Wes Bircher.
Mr. Breer's talking about. Oh, sure. I went out to see him. I drop by the store and buy a pack of cigarettes once in a while. When did this happen about Neal, anyway? This thing about poison?
Just today, they exhumed his body and made some tests.
Good. I just can't believe it. And his dad talking about suicide. Nothing seems to make sense to me.
And you don't think he was depressed about his marriage?
Well, not depressed exactly.
What then?
What I said to his dad was that Neal didn't seem to be interested in anything anymore. We used to go hunting and fishing. He loved it. But the past year, maybe less, well, he just lost interest. But I never said had anything to do with his marriage to Paula.
That's what Mr. Breer told me.
Well, he's wrong. I never talked to him about her, about their marriage, because I knew that he was just against it.
What do you think was wrong with Neal?
Well, I don't know now. After he died, I figured it was because he'd been sick. I felt terrible about how hard he worked around here, and except that he never said anything about it, I was half blaming myself. But now, with this stuff about poison, I just don't know what to say.
Well, you realize how serious this is now. If it wasn't suicide, Wes, it was murder.
Yeah, that's right, isn't it? Everything you told me, I just never thought about that.
Was there something wrong with Neal's marriage?
Well,
I know it's tough, because to tell me you have to talk about friends that you've known for a long time, but the truth has to come out. I'm not the only one that'll question you, Wes.
Well, I don't mind talking. I don't think anything I say will mean anything. Everybody will tell you the same thing. There wasn't one person in our graduating class that thought Paul and Neal should have gotten married.
Why?
Well, because it was all so one-sided. Neal had chased her all through school, and Paula just sort of laughed at him. After they were married, they used to come over and spend the evening with my wife and me, and, well, even then you got the idea that it wasn't quite right. The only time Paula ever got interested was when we got talking about, well, when we were in school.
Why did they get married, Wes?
Well, Paula, and everybody knows this, Paula's strong-willed. And the guy that she really liked in school had to go to medical college. She didn't want him to go away, and, well, when he told her he had to go, she just got sore. She threw herself at Neal, and they ran away and got married.
And you think he knew that?
Maybe not when he should have, but he must have found out. He never said anything. Like I said, he didn't seem depressed. More like he was always trying to, get her to love him. Gosh, I don't know. Maybe he did do something. Maybe he finally gave up and...
Who is this other guy? Is he still here in town?
Yeah, he's here for the summer. He's Al Richards.
Alan Richards?
Yeah, Doc Richards' son. They went together all through school, but she just told him that she wouldn't wait for him if he had to go away.
She sounds spoiled, huh? Suppose you tell me what happened here the day Neal died. According to Bircher, nothing unusual had happened that day. They'd opened their place at 7:30. They hadn't worked unusually hard. They'd taken a break at about 9. And Neal Breer had been taken ill about 25 minutes later. And as I'd heard, he was dead not long after that. These people didn't fit into a picture of murder. None of the innocent ones had suspected it for a minute. But it was murder. I didn't have any proof of it when I left the service station, but I thought I had answers to a lot of questions. The solution was pathetically simple. Hello, Mrs. Breer. Afraid I'll have to bother you again.
What do you want? Haven't you caused enough trouble?
The trouble started before I came here. I come in?
All right. They called me about the inquest.
I told you yesterday that it would be easier if you'd help me get one. You didn't, so it had to be done without you. Now that I've learned your husband was murdered, they're going...
Neal wasn't murdered.
How do you know that?
I know that no one would murder him. There'd be no reason to.
How do you think he died?
I don't know. If this story about poison is true, he must have taken it himself.
Why do you think he would have done that?
I don't know.
I've talked to people. I know more about you and Neal than you think I do.
All right. I didn't love him. He knew it. I could never love him.
That's why he committed suicide?
I don't know. You asked me why he would. We weren't happy.
Why didn't you get a divorce?
I wanted. I don't know. We didn't want to. There are only certain grounds in this state.
You aren't cut out for this part, Mrs. Breer.
What
The
part?
quick answers. You're scared stiff.
I am not. Why should I be?
Didn't you start to say that you wanted a divorce and then you thought better of that?
No, I didn't.
What you meant is that he wouldn't give you a divorce no matter what you did, isn't it?
No. No, that isn't what I meant.
What then?
What I said.
What about Alan Richards?
What about him?
Neal wouldn't divorce you and you just had to get away from him. Isn't that right?
I don't know what you're saying. Neal's heart. He said he...
Why don't you tell me? You married him on impulse. You knew you shouldn't have.
You talked to Alan.
Yes, I have.
What did he say?
He called me last night to warn me to leave town.
No, you talked to him today. He told you.
You tell me your part of it.
It's all lost, isn't it? You know, don't you?
Yeah, I think I do.
We couldn't help it. Al came home for Christmas vacation and it started all over again. I love him. I love him so.
Sit down, Mrs. Breer.
We couldn't help it. I wanted to get a divorce. Neal wouldn't. It was his fault, too.
This was near Christmas?
He told me he knew why I married him and he'd never let me go. He told me I deserved it for doing what I did to him. I begged him.
Did he know why you wanted to leave him?
No, nobody knew. Everybody forgot about Alan and me. We were careful. But we knew we had to do something.
Alan was studying to be a doctor like his father, wasn't he?
Yes. It was my fault. I should have waited for him.
He decided on the poison.
Yes. Oh, yes. It was all going to work. Neal's heart. No one would ever ask a question. But it was my fault. It was my fault.
The rest of it I gave to the police. The fact that the uncommon poison was available to a medical student was administered by way of a vacuum bottle of coffee. After that, I left town. Expense account item 2, miscellaneous, $86.70. Item 3, same as item 1, transportation back to Hartford. Expense account total, $556.70. Remarks? I hope the company will understand my not going back to Dr. Richards. A doctor in doubt about a death certificate calling on the interested insurance company for confidential help is a splendid idea. But in this case, the doctor's son was an accomplice to murder. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
Remember, friends, for refreshment while you work, for enjoyment anytime, chew a stick of Wrigley's Spearmint Gum. There's lots of lively real mint flavor in it to cool your mouth, freshen your taste, and sweeten your breath. And chewing Wrigley's Spearmint helps keep you fresh and alert. You feel better, work better, get more fun out of doing things. So, indoors, outdoors, at work or at play, always keep delicious Wrigley's Spearmint Chewing Gum handy. For refreshment while you work, for enjoyment anytime, chew a stick of Wrigley's Spearmint Gum. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, brought to you by Wrigley's Spearmint Gum, stars Edmund O'Brien in the title role and is written by Gil Dowd with music by Eddie Dunstetter. Edmund O'Brien can soon be seen starring in the Paramount Pictures production, Warpath. Featured in tonight's cast were Ralph Moody, Edgar Barrier, Joe Duvall, Gene Bates, Mary Shipp, Tony Barrett, and Peter Leeds. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, is transcribed in Hollywood by Jaime Del Valle. The makers of Wrigley's Spearmint Chewing Gum hope you've enjoyed tonight's story of Johnny Dollar and that you're enjoying delicious Wrigley's Spearmint Gum every day. We invite you to join us next week at the same time when, from Hollywood, Edmund O'Brien returns in another adventure of yours truly, Johnny Dollar. Bob Stevenson speaking. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.